This guy was a nobody at school, just one of the 500,000 average students in Korea. But that was all about to change. He was ripped from his world by a dragon who only wanted to prove that he wasn't stupid. But why? Portal covered the entire school. In his vision, everyone around him turned into statues, as if time had stopped. Then the magic circle appeared again. When he opened his eyes, he could hear the sound of applause. Everyone there had a different colored hair. They were speaking a strange language, impossible to understand. So who were these people? The red-haired guy used language magic. Now he could understand everything. While that guy was bragging, the others used Goku's teleportation along with everyone else. Our boy had no idea what was happening. The place around him was gigantic. This definitely wasn't meant for normal people. The guy then introduced himself as Ryard, the Great Red Dragon. The protagonist didn't understand. He looked completely human, but out of nowhere, he revealed a gigantic tail from his backside. Terrified, the protagonist was immediately hugged by the dragon. It turns out that all those people with different colored hair from earlier were also dragons in this world. The guy explained that he had summoned him using magic. He wanted to prove that red dragons were intelligent because everyone always called him a dumb idiot. In other words, our boy was only summoned because this dragon didn't want to be called stupid. But there was one problem. This idiot only thought about bringing him here and never thought about how to send him back. In other words, this damn dragon really was useless. Just then, another dragon appeared, and they disappeared, telling him to wait 1 minute. When they came back, the red-haired guy was furious because he had been completely humiliated. In the end, everyone called him a stupid dragon. He began explaining that dimensional magic had to be created from scratch, and that would take at least 50 years, or maybe even 100 years. The other dragon said there were 2 ways to solve the problem. 1, make this idiot create the magic himself. 2, have him create the portal himself and return to his own world. With that, Ryard suggests that the boy create a dimensional gate himself to get back to his world. Excited by the idea, he snaps his fingers and confirms that this is the only way. Then, Ryard explains that since it would be impossible to send him back on his own, they'll need to go with an alternative plan. Standing before the young man, the dragon reveals he'll have to become a mage to learn how to open the gate by himself. Confused, Lee Kyul reacts by asking what he meant by that. Soon, his voice echoes through the place as he shouts, completely shocked by the proposal. Ignoring his reaction, Ryard orders the mark to be imprinted on the boy. In an instant, a blue crystal is absorbed into the young man's chest. Scared, he asks if there will be any side effects, but the other admits it's his first time doing this to a human. While Lee Kyul calls him an idiot dragon, Ryard explains that the translation magic he injected into him should last for 200 years. Hearing that, the boy realizes that magic might actually be a good thing if it can pull off something like that. Ryard just watches him in silence, confused by the sudden change in attitude. With newfound energy, Lee Kyul declares with conviction that he'll do his best to learn everything about magic. As soon as he finishes speaking, a figure emerges from a magic circle in the center of the hall. Her long white hair sways as the light around her intensifies. The white-haired woman greets Ryard, saying it had been a while since they last saw each other. Then she turns to the boy and introduces herself as Sefers, his new teacher. A bit awkwardly, he shakes her hand and says his name is Lee Kyul. As the woman comments on how interesting it will be to teach him, Ryard interrupts and asks how long he plans on holding her hand. The young man apologizes immediately, and Sefers encourages him not to give up halfway through. Ryard then asks if he's really thought this through, explaining that to use the gate he would need to reach the 9th circle of magic. Lee Kyul stares at him for a moment, pondering the situation. With conviction, he states that he prefers to learn from Sefers so he can open the gate with his own hands. The mage simply accepts his decision and warns him to be careful not to die, leaving the boy completely confused. Soon Sefers guides them to her home, which turns out to be a castle atop a mountain. As they walk, she explains that she developed an optimized teaching method so he can become a mage in the shortest time possible. When the young man asks how fast that would be, the teacher explains that a human genius would take 10 years to master the 3rd circle. With her method, however, she guarantees he'll master the 5th circle in just 100 days. Hyped by the news, Lee Kyul says that's amazing, and the woman confirms her method is foolproof. With that, She winks at the boy and suggests they start right away. Lee Kyul screams in pain as his body is enveloped by intense energy. Sefers then explains that she's injecting mana directly into him, as it would take too long to wait for him to build it up through training. The teacher continues, saying her method focuses on getting fast results by cutting out unnecessary traditions. Despite the explanation, the boy begs her to get him out of there. In response, the woman shouts for him to push through with willpower and reminds him of his goal to return home. With a smile, she reminds him of his promise not to give up, assuring him that the 100 days will fly by. In the distance, Ryard's voice echoes through the sky, wishing the young man doesn't die. Later, Sefer hands him a capsule, explaining that it contains all the nutrients he needs. Then she puts him to sleep, stating he needs proper rest to continue his training the next day. First thing in the morning, the teacher comments on what a great day it is while the boy receives another mana injection in the background. After lunch, she yawns, saying she's sleepy, completely indifferent to his relentless training. During the theory class, the woman explains that magic relies on 3 fundamentals: mana, incantation, and medium. The young man realizes that, just like in math, experienced mages perform the incantation process entirely in their minds. Suddenly, he despairs upon concluding that he's bad at magic because he's also terrible at math. Dismissive, Sefer waves her hand and announces that the next training session will last 5 hours. Sefer congratulates him on finally managing to draw a magic circle and reach the first circle. Despite that, she remarks that his progress is slow and that he'll also need to improve his physical condition. While the boy trains, the teacher yells at him to be careful not to burn the whole house down. At another moment, she cheerfully says she really wants shaved ice right as he was practicing his new magic. With that, the young man's physical training forces him to fight off hordes of beastmen. The youth devotes himself to meditation to refine his mana control under Sefer's watchful eye. The woman observes him with a smile, pleased with his clear growth. After the 100 days, he's finally shocked to realize he has reached the 5th magic circle. Seeing him, Sefer congratulates him on completing his training, stating that he can now be proud to call himself a mage. She then explains that her method could only take him up to the 5th level, and from there on, his growth depends entirely on him. Next, the woman hands him a magic staff as a graduation gift. The teacher details that the gem on top holds amplification and support enchantments. With it in hand, all he needs to do is inject mana and give a command for the magic to manifest instantly. Sefer also reveals that a dragon bone blade is hidden inside the staff, a gift for his dedication. After he's moved to tears, the boy thanks her, celebrating that he finally made it. With his training complete, Sefer lets him know she's taking him back to Ryard's home, and the boy asks if it's going to be right this second. A bit sheepishly, he tries to find the right words to say goodbye to his teacher. With that, the young man hopefully asks if they'll meet again in the future. The woman looks at him for a moment with a gentle smile on her face. She then shakes his hand and confirms they will, as he will always be her student. Shortly after, a teleportation portal opens up and pulls him inside as Sefer's waves goodbye. As soon as he disappears, the magic circle on the floor fades, leaving her alone in the grand hall. Looking up, the master wishes good luck to her newest apprentice, Lee Kyul. Upon seeing the boy, Ryard asks in surprise if he's not dead yet. Outraged, Lee Kyul yells that the mage already knew what was going to happen, but he simply replies that he heard the method was pretty special. Ryard then reminds him that he was the only one who insisted on going, leaving the young man at a loss for words. Noticing his expression, the man asks what's wrong, and Lee Kyul laments that the 9th level still feels so far away. At that, the mage says he talked to Sefers about it and that there's still a way. He then mentions the dragon heart, revealing that dragons actually have 2 hearts. The first one, according to him, pumps blood, while the second circulates mana. The young man asks if he knows the dragon Arcrian, but Ryard brushes it off and pretends not to know who he's talking about. Even so, the mage shares that Arcrian was an ancient dragon who died millennia ago, and his heart didn't fade away into nature. Instead, the creature split his heart into 4 pieces and scattered them across the continent. When Lee Kyul asks why he's telling him all this, Ryard explains that if he gathers all 4 fragments, instantly, the boy cuts in and asks if a dragon god will appear to grant his wish. The man tells him to snap out of it, and reveals that if he gets those fragments, he'll be able to reach the 9th level. Excited, The youth asks where they are, but Ryard admits he has no idea, leaving him clueless about how to find them. With a smirk, the mage just tells him to do his best and leaves him alone with his frustration. The young man suggests Ryard give him a piece of his own heart, but the mage asks if he takes him for some kind of saint. Without hesitation, the mage attacks him and places a new mark on his body. Then, he tosses a device to the boy, explaining it's a dragon heart detector, and orders him to set off and find them. As a magic circle opens beneath his feet, the boy desperately asks where he's being sent. With a mocking smirk, the mage replies that he's obviously going to look for the fragments he just mentioned. The boy can only grit his teeth in frustration as he is teleported away. From a distance, Ryard waves goodbye while the young man screams about how much he hates that dragon. In the blink of an eye, Lee Kuehl is left alone in a completely unfamiliar place. Flat on the ground, he screams the mage's name with all his strength. Outraged, he kicks a stone, complaining about the way he was treated until Ryard's voice suddenly echoes, saying he forgot to hand something over. The man then stares at him and asks if he was talking trash about him, but the boy instantly denies it. Brushing it off, the mage hands him a ring, explaining it's the crest of the noble Marquis Delphine. He adds that with the ring, the boy will be recognized as a member of the Delphine family, a title he earned himself over a century ago. Surprised, the young man asks if this Marquis is still alive, but the mage simply says he has no idea, since he hasn't visited the kingdom in a long time. At that response, the boy is left speechless once again. Ryard reveals that despite everything, he left behind a good sword called the Black Heart, which has a dragon heart fragment embedded in its hilt. The boy then asks why he left it behind, but the mage replies he simply didn't need it anymore and tells him to do his best. Before leaving, he mentions he arranged for someone to help him, while the boy complains about the vague explanation. With that, the red-haired man disappears in a flash of light. Left behind, the young man can't believe what just happened. Suddenly, he finds himself falling through the middle of a forest and screams, confused about where he is. Completely lost, the boy laments having neither money nor a map to guide him. As he walks, a strange noise catches his attention. Curious, he moves closer to see what's going on. Hiding behind cover, he spots a girl fighting a horde of orcs all by herself. The young elf glares at them with determination, ready for battle. Seeing the scene, he decides to help her, shouting that it's far too dangerous for her. However, in his haste, the boy trips and crashes right into the middle of the fight. Without noticing him, the girl finishes off an orc that was begging for mercy. With her eyes glowing red, she continues her rampage without a second thought. Terrified, the remaining orcs scream that she's way too strong and that they need to run. One of the creatures is sent flying by an invisible impact. Leaping into the air, the girl lunges at the last orc trying to escape. Desperate, the monster turns around and begs her to spare his life. Ignoring his plea, the young girl yells, asking him where he thinks he's going. Behind her, Lee Kuehl gets up from the ground, grabbing the staff that fell alongside him. After wiping them all out, the girl stretches and remarks on what a great stress reliever that was. Suddenly, she turns around and notices the boy for the first time. She demands to know who he is, and the boy asks if he really looks like a monster ally to her. Confused, she asks why he's there, but her expression quickly shifts as she realizes who he is. With a smile, the girl asks what took him so long, saying she'd been waiting for him. Confused, the young man asks if they know each other, and she confirms that her father told her all about him. Hearing that, he begins to think and piece everything together. Soon his attention shifts to the girl's reddish hair. Then he notices her eyes, which glow bright like rubies. Connecting the dots, Lee Kuehl is stunned to realize she can only be Ryard's daughter. Shocked, Lee Kuehl thinks about how Ryard is actually a father, something he never could have imagined. Wasting no time, the girl says they need to head off and find the dragon heart right away. She then introduces herself as the half-elf Lucid Ilnia, but tells him to call her Lucy, and he replies that she can call him LK. The young girl gives him a thumbs up. With a smile, she says it's a pleasure to meet him. He watches her with a gentle smile on his face. As he shakes her hand, the boy replies that the pleasure is all his. Once on their way, he asks which part of the human territory they need to go to. The guy just stares at her with a confused look on his face. Arriving at a bustling city, He thinks that reading that book about humans really paid off. Excited, Lucy points ahead and says they've arrived in the condemned region. The two walk through the market, while vendors call out their fresh bread and fruits. Suddenly, a man with a cart yells at them to get out of the way, and the boy pulls the girl aside at the very last second. When she asks what that was all about, he explains that the region specializes in hunting monsters from Dragon Mountain. He then comments that selling monster parts is the main business around here, making it look like a tuna butchering show. Suddenly, Lucy's stomach rumbles loudly with hunger. With that, the girl declares she needs to eat and runs off. But the young man stops her, asking if her father gave her any money for the trip. He then pours the contents of a small coin pouch into his hand. Desperate, LK asks why she left all the jewels at home, and she explains that it would take months to go back and get them. Nearly in tears from worry, the young man decides they need to find an inn first. Now sitting at a table, Lucy excitedly gives thanks for the hearty meal in front of her. As they eat, the boy laments that everything would be easier if they had brought some jewels. Nearby, he notices mercenaries leaving the place, and wonders if they managed to negotiate with the Lord. Suddenly, a man approaches and asks if he can join them, and the young man agrees. The newcomer thanks him and introduces himself alongside his companion. He says his name is Mage, a mercenary, and introduces the priestess Elysian, while LK introduces himself and Lucy as well. Mage assumes he isn't a mercenary, and the boy confirms he's just an adventurer. In the background, other men in the hall shout furiously, cursing the lord of the city. Curious about the commotion, the young man asks if something happened there, and the other realizes he has just arrived. With that, Mage begins to explain that 5 months ago, monsters from Dragon Mountain attacked the village of Heighton. The mercenary explains that Baron Condemned, the lord of the region, summoned various mercenaries to fight off the monsters. He continues, saying that at the cost of many of their lives, the village was finally able to enjoy peace once again. When the boy asks if that isn't a good thing, Mage replies that the problem was the aftermath of the battle. With that, the man reveals that the Lord not only pocketed all the incentives, but also failed to offer any compensation to the families of the deceased. In the middle of the story, Lee Kuel panics as he realizes Lucy is taking all his food. Suddenly, the tavern door bursts open with a bang. A line of fully armed guards marches in formation. Quickly, the soldiers surround the hall and everyone inside. One of them shouts, demanding everyone stay silent. Right behind them, a man in a blue cape walks toward the center. With his back to everyone, he introduces himself as Reynold Pon Condemned, the son of the region's lord. Turning around, the newcomer announces he has come to deliver a message from his father. Confused, Mage asks what the meaning of all this is. Reynold then says he will offer double the original pay to all dissatisfied mercenaries, but warns that the offer is only good until tomorrow. When someone asks about the deceased, the Lord's son replies that he can't give money to fools who lost their lives, leaving everyone outraged. Reynold then demands silence and threatens to throw anyone who has a problem with his father's words into the dungeon. With a mocking smirk, the Lord's son asks if everyone got the message. Outraged, Elysian shouts that this is absurd. The priestess confronts him, saying that many of their comrades died because of the knight's reckless strategy. Before the crowd, she states that compensation is a tribute to those who are gone, asking if they too haven't lost loved ones. Hearing this, the crowd grows restless and begins demanding their pay and a fair share of the spoil. Watching the scene unfold, Lee Kuel comments that things are getting out of hand. In an insincere tone, Reynold agrees to pay compensation for the deceased, leaving the young woman surprised by his answer. In an instant, he grabs the priestess's arm tightly. The Lord's son then reveals he will only pay if she comes with him, suggesting he would do much more if she keeps him satisfied. Without thinking twice, Elysian knees him right in the groin. The young woman screams at him, asking how he dares say such filthy words to a servant of God. Enraged, the nobleman orders his guards to arrest the woman for attacking him. As the soldiers step forward, the young woman backs away, unsure of what to do. Suddenly, she is stunned to see someone stepping in front of her. Out of nowhere, the young man places himself between her and the Lord's son. Surprised by his actions, the priestess calls out his name, unable to understand his intentions. Reynold stares closely at him, demanding to know who he is. Analyzing the noble, the young man realizes he's smarter than he looks for turning the tables in his favor. The Lord's son stares back in silence, doubting he'd have the nerve to make things worse on purpose. However, the boy realizes he was wrong when Reynolds simply shouts for the guards to arrest the woman. Without warning, a punch lands flush on the noble's face, knocking him backward. To everyone's surprise, Lucy leaps over the boy and attacks the Lord's son. She then turns around and starts beating up Lee Kuel, saying he deserves a thrashing for meddling where he wasn't invited. Taking in the scene, Mage tells his companions they can't just stand by after hearing such nonsense. Just like that, the mercenaries charge at the guards, igniting a full-blown brawl in the tavern. In despair, the owner laments as he watches his inn get completely trashed. Amidst the chaos, the boy panics over getting dragged into trouble when he just wanted to go home in peace. As the fight rages on, Lucy pummels the fallen noble, who curses at her and refuses to yield, only to quickly beg for mercy. Before she can continue, a guard sneaks up behind her, screaming that she's dead. However, the soldier gets struck by a lightning bolt that instantly paralyzes him. Right after, several other guards collapse to the ground, electrocuted by the young man's magic. Everyone in the tavern turns around in shock at the boy's display of power. Macon and Elysian stare at him, stunned, unable to believe what they just witnessed. With a dirty, terrified face, Reynolds crawls on the floor, completely intimidated. Standing up, the young man points at him and reveals himself as a mage. Confused, the mercenaries wonder why a mage would be here, but the boy tells them not to worry and to keep doing what they were doing. One of the knights then orders them to attack the mage first, claiming he won't be able to cast another spell so soon. Unfazed, Lee Kuel summons a fireball in his hand, sending the soldier into a panic. He then hurls the spell outside the tavern, causing a massive explosion that sends several guards flying. Seeing the destruction, the owner passes out from shock while his staff tries to keep him conscious. The young man asks why they assumed he couldn't use magic back-to-back, leaving the soldiers speechless. Facing the terrified guards, Lucy calls them scumbags and prepares to fight. The dust settles, and silence takes over the second floor of the inn. Soon, all the soldiers are defeated, kneeling on the ground, while the girl declares herself satisfied with the outcome. Impressed, Macon approaches and thanks him for helping Elysian. With that, the other mercenaries crowd around to thank him, but Lucy complains, saying she was the one who did all the work. At a loss, the young man wonders how he's going to get out of this mess. Meanwhile, a golden light envelopes the priestess' hands. Soon, Elysian uses her holy magic to heal one of the mercenaries' wounds. Still on the ground, Reynolds screams that they won't get away with this, while the young man watches the healing magic in awe. Losing her patience, Lucy raises her sword and asks if he wants another beating, terrifying the noble. Amidst the chaos, Macon warns that one of the knights managed to escape, and the others worry about the Lord's reaction. Noticing the tension, Lee Kuel realizes that despite their victory, he shouldn't stick around for long either. Suddenly, he remembers Ryard's words, explaining that he had planted a seed in his mana circle. In his memory, the mage instructs him to channel mana into the detector to find the dragon heart. With that, the young man activates the device, and a holographic map appears in his hand. As he tries to figure out the device, one of the mercenaries suggests locking the doors to come up with a plan. Excited, Lucy suggests bringing back the heads of the Lord and his son, and the others agree it's a great idea. Macon then asks if there's another way, and the young man explains that as long as the Lord's son is here, more soldiers will keep coming. When the girl asks what he means, the young man replies that they should just make the situation as bad as possible. Hearing his answer, Ryard's daughter is left completely confused by his intentions. Outside, the captain of the knights, Campbell, arrives on horseback and asks if the young master is safe. Hearing this, the mercenaries start rooting for the mage, who feels completely backed into a corner. Campbell then approaches the young man and demands his identity, to which he replies that his name is LK. The captain then accuses him of attacking Reynolds and his guards. The boy tries to explain, but Campbell cuts him off, stating he heard he was the one who struck first. Unfazed, Lee Kuel shoots back, saying the young master tried to arrest the priestess for no reason. As he speaks, his eyes glow as he activates his night vision skill. With it, he spots several knights hidden on the rooftops, ready for an ambush. Without hesitation, the mage summons a magic circle and prepares a missile spell. Soon, a barrage of energy projectiles shoots up toward the hidden soldiers. The men on the roof are caught off guard and fail to dodge in time. Desperate, one of them screams for everyone to run as fast as they can. With a smirk, the young man asks if setting an ambush mid-conversation isn't a bit cowardly. He then reveals he saw right through their tactic of using the soldiers as a distraction to rescue the Lord's son. Enraged, the captain glares at him, calling him an arrogant bastard. Left with no choice, the captain shouts that there's nothing else to do and orders all soldiers to charge. Seeing the troop advance, the boy wonders if they're really going to storm the inn and decides to use a wall of fire. Suddenly, the voice of the Lord's son echoes, begging for someone to save him. Tied up with a sword at his throat, the young noble cries for help, but Lucy tells him to shut up if he doesn't want to get cut. Shocked by the sight, the knight captain screams his young master's name. With a triumphant smile, the girl orders Campbell to make all his soldiers fall back immediately. To make matters worse, Machen appears on the roof carrying the unconscious lord, shouting that even his father has been kidnapped. Powerless, the captain turns to the young man and says that since they have what they want, they can finally talk. With the upper hand, the young mage smiles and suggests they have a real conversation. Hours earlier at the inn, the young man asks Machen how many mercenaries haven't been paid yet. The man replies that frankly, almost none of them have. So the boy realizes they need to unite everyone before the Lord's soldiers arrive. When Elysian steps up to help, he tells her he actually needs Machen for something else. He then turns to the priestess and asks if she can take care of it, taking her completely by surprise. She blames herself for letting things get out of hand, but he reassures her that she doesn't need to feel responsible. Seeing this unfold, the local guild master approaches and says he'll join them too. Introducing himself as Cromwell, he says he can't just stand by while a kid is putting in so much effort. With a pat on the back, he calls the young man kid, leaving him a bit embarrassed. With that settled, Lee Kuehl asks Lucy to get the mansion's blueprints from Reynolds, adding that he needs someone to guide them there. Hearing the word mansion, Machen stares at him in complete shock, unable to grasp the plan. With a smirk, the young man confirms he intends to kidnap the Lord himself. Back in the present, the gathered mercenaries face off against the soldiers outside the inn. Impressed, the captain is stunned they managed to rally so many men so quickly and even capture the Lord. Witnessing this feat, Campbell concludes that the boy shouldn't be underestimated. Sitting on a barrel surrounded by mercenaries, the captured Lord asks what they plan to do with him. In front of the Lord, the young man explains that he brought him there so they could talk, and the Lord asks what they want. With that, the young man says he appreciates his directness and lists his 3 demands: payment for the monster bounty and 30 gold coins in compensation for the deceased. Finally, he demands that no one be unfairly punished, reminding him that it was the Lord's son who caused all this trouble. The Baron, however, refuses to listen, calling it all ridiculous and refusing to entertain their nonsense. Outraged, Elysian confronts him, stating that over 100 people died because of his order to attack the main monster force. In a brief flashback, the image of a fallen comrade flashes through her mind. The priestess remembers that, despite trying her best, she couldn't save everyone. With tears in her eyes, she pours her heart out, saying her friend was just one of many, and all she could do was guide them in their final moments. Hearing her words, Machen closes his eyes and remains silent. Behind the noble, the mercenaries glare at him with growing fury. Feeling the pressure, the Baron changes his tone and says that, out of benevolence, he won't punish them for the crime they commit. However, he shouts that he won't pay a single coin. At this response, the young man thinks to himself that this Baron is cheap beyond imagination. Confused, he asks why the Lord refuses to pay when the knight's reckless plan was what increased the casualties. But the man yells that it isn't his fault. Hearing that, the other mercenaries fly into a rage and suggest they just kill him. Covering her mouth, the girl yawns out of boredom. Losing her patience, Lucy says she's tired and just wants to get this over with. Terrified, the Lord asks if she isn't afraid of the consequences of her actions. With her sword pointed straight at him, the young woman asks if he really thinks she cares about that. Desperate, the noble's son warns his father that the elf isn't bluffing, and the man stammers as he tries to make a new offer. However, the young man cuts her off and tells her to wait, leaving her confused by what he's saying. Seizing the opportunity, the Lord suggests they settle everything through a duel. He then explains that if they win, he'll pay what he owes, but if they lose, they won't get a single coin. Indignantly, Keel asks why they should have to fight for money they're already owed. To sweeten the deal, the noble offers to pay 20 times more for the monsters and double the compensation, but warns that if they lose, everyone will be punished. Finally, the Baron declares he'd be satisfied if just the boy worked for him for a year as punishment. Faced with this proposal, the young mage is completely shocked and speechless. Ignoring his protests, Cromwell excitedly accepts the deal and calls everyone to battle. The two sides then agree to the terms: a 5-round duel at the city arena at noon the following day. Unofficial, the Lord shouts for pen and paper, while the young man keeps trying to get them to listen to him. The young man expresses his suspicion about the offer, but Cromwell and Lucy brush off his concerns, thrilled by the idea of the duel. Lee Keel realizes that anyone could see the Baron was plotting something. Suddenly, the young man receives news that leaves him utterly stunned. He discovers that, by tradition, mages aren't allowed to participate in duels. Makhan explains that because magic is considered too lethal, it's deemed unfit for this kind of combat. With that, the boy panics, realizing he won't be able to fight and will just have to watch to see if he becomes a slave or not. Next, they set the match order with Cromwell, Makhan, and Lucy among those chosen to compete. Looking at the list, the young man asks who Lily and Osborne are, and the mercenary replies he's never heard those names, suggesting the Lord brought them in from elsewhere. Worried about the opponents' identities, he wonders if they can actually win, but Makhan cuts in, saying it's time to go. Outside, Elysian and the other mercenaries shout with all their might, telling them they have to win. The crowd continues to cheer enthusiastically, placing all their faith in the group. When they arrive, they find the arena packed to brim with spectators. The roaring crowds echo throughout the venue, building an aura of intense anticipation. As they walk in, the young man notices that rumors of the duel have spread like wildfire. On the other side of the arena, the Baron awaits them with an air of superiority, flanked by 2 of his best knights. With a smug grin, the Baron asks if the boy slept well. Showing no emotion, he replies that he slept fine. The Lord then advises him to enjoy his sleep while he can, since he'll be working for him soon enough. Unsure why he's so confident, the young mage tells everyone to get into position. Soon, the referee steps forward, introducing herself as High Priestess Felix, and explains that the first team to 3 victories wins. She continues, stating that if an opponent can no longer fight or surrenders, the other must disarm immediately. Standing alongside the others, the mercenaries listen carefully to the rules. With that, in the name of Palzir, the god of duels, the referee raises her flag and announces the start of the match. As he watches the boy, the Baron thinks with an evil smile that he's going to win no matter what. The crowd's cheers echo through the massive Colosseum arena. From the stands, the young man and the Baron watch closely as the referee announces the start of the first round. She then declares that the first match will be between Ser Rowan and Cromwell. With a confident smirk, the guildmaster says it's time to have a little fun. Watching him, the young mage thinks he sent him out to secure the momentum of a first victory. Now, in the center of the arena, Cromwell taunts his opponent, asking why he hasn't shown up yet. Suddenly, one of the Colosseum gates begins to open slowly. Seeing what comes out, the mercenary's expression shifts from confidence to sudden nervousness. From the gate, an imposing knight clad in heavy armor emerges. Mounted on an equally armored warhorse, the man charges into the arena, lance in hand. Completely shocked by the sight, Cromwell fails to react in time. In an instant, the knight strikes him head-on with a devastating lance blow. The guildmaster's eyes roll back from the impact. With the sheer force of the attack, he is sent flying, defeated in a single blow. The mercenary falls to the ground, screaming in pain as he takes the hit. From atop his horse, the knight calls out that since it's a training lance, the blow won't be fatal. With Cromwell down, the knight raises his weapon in victory to the cheering crowd. Outraged, the young man yells that he should be disqualified for that. He confronts the Lord about the horse, but the noble retorts that it's obvious a knight would fight. With no one else to turn to, the youth appeals to the referee, but she explains that the only rule is winning 3 out of 5 rounds. With that, she declares Ser Rowan the winner, leaving the boy frustrated as the Baron laughs at his plight. The second battle begins shortly after and ends just as quickly, securing another win for Sir Campbell. Thrilled, the Lord celebrates his 2 victories, declaring himself the winner of the duel. Ignoring the boos from the crowd, he orders Lily to be brought out for the final blow. The young man fumes and questions why he's changing the order, pointing out that her fight was supposed to be forced. Suddenly, he turns around upon hearing Lucy call his name. With a confident smile, the girl waves and says she's doing just fine. She then suggests wrapping this up quickly so they can go get something to eat. Seeing her, the young man gets worried, remembering he only put her on the roster because her name sounded female. The referee announces the start of the 3rd round to the excited crowd. She then calls the match between Lily and Lucy, who steps into the arena with absolute resolve. The young elf stares at the opposite gate, waiting for her opponent. With a loud creak, the heavy iron gate slowly begins to open. Heavy footsteps echo through the arena as a massive figure starts to emerge. The girl watches silently as her opponent's shadow grows larger and larger. To her surprise, stepping out of the gate is a giant troll wielding a wooden club. From the stands, the boy yells in disbelief that there's no way that thing is Lily. Among the spectators, the mercenary stands shocked and speechless at the creature's appearance. Suddenly, the crowd erupts, recognizing the monster as a troll. Smirking, the Baron remarks that Lily is as reliable as ever, but the youth insists that it's clearly a troll. When he asks what that monster really is, the Lord loses his temper and screams that it is Lily. The boy pushes back, asking why on earth a creature like that would have a name like Lily. Losing her patience, Lucy yawns and says, "It doesn't matter," asking them to just start the fight already. The young man yells at her, asking if she's really serious about fighting a troll, but the Baron cuts him off, demanding the match begin. Flustered, the referee agrees and officially starts the round. The troll slowly moves toward the elf, who stands her ground without flinching. With a deafening roar, the monster prepares to strike. Worried, the young man screams at Lucy to be careful. However, the girl remains completely calm and draws her sword. The blade glows with a radiant golden energy as she prepares for battle. The troll raises its club and launches into a furious attack. The creature charges straight at her with terrifying speed. From the stands, the boy shouts his friend's name, fearing the worst. With a single blow, the monster slams its club into the ground with terrifying force. At the very last second, Lucy dodges the attack with incredible agility. In the blink of an eye, she leaps right over the troll's arm. Mid-air, the young girl shouts Ryard's name. Suddenly, her sword is engulfed in intense flames. With a spinning kick, the girl lunges at the troll with her flaming weapon. Seeing the spectacle, the mercenaries in the crowd shout in shock, recognizing it as a magic flame sword. In a flash, Lucy delivers a fiery slash right across the creature's leg. The strike leaves a trail of fire and a deep gash on the monster's knee. With its mouth agape, the troll roars in agony from the searing heat of the wound. In utter disbelief, the Baron screams that it's impossible and commands Lily to attack again. Enraged, the monster turns back to the girl and lets out an even louder roar. Unfazed, the girl charges forward and slices off the creature's arm with her burning blade. The severed limb crashes to the ground as dark liquid spurts from the stump. Landing nimbly on her feet, she immediately sets up her next move. Without missing a beat, the young elf leaps toward the troll to land the finishing blow. With a solemn look, she grips the hilt of her sword tightly. Mid-air, Lucy plunges the flaming blade deep into the giant monster's chest. From the impact, the creature collapses onto the arena floor, completely defeated and motionless. In utter despair, the Baron clutches his head, screaming over all the money he just lost. Thrilled by the victory, the boy cheers that she did an amazing job, finally understanding why Ryard sent her along. Stunned, the other mercenaries whisper about how effortlessly she took down the troll. Realizing the elf is far from weak, standing atop the fallen monster, the girl scoffs, asking if he was all size and no bite. Right before the referee announces that with Lily unable to fight, Lucy wins the 3rd round. With victory secured, the girl poses for the crowd alongside the defeated monster. Refusing to accept it, the Baron shouts that she used a magic sword, calling it cheating and demanding her disqualification. Annoyed, the boy confronts him, saying he has no right to talk after sending out a troll. But the noble retorts that a troll is fine, but a magic sword is not. Grit teeth tight, the young man fumes at the old man's hypocrisy. He then turns to the judge, arguing that as long as it doesn't break the rules, anything goes in a duel. The priestess pauses for a moment, weighing her options to make the best decision. With a wave of her hand, she declares Lucy the winner of the round. After the match, the boy congratulates her and asks if her weapon really is a magic sword. With a smile, the young girl confirms it was a birthday gift from her father. Hearing this, the boy realizes Reard probably used his own bone to forge the weapon, proving he's a total doting father. Despite the ruling, the Lord refuses to accept defeat, but the young man asks if he dares to defy the god's decision. With a sly grin, the Baron points at him, saying he knows his scheme is to lend the sword to the next fighter. A light bulb goes off in the boy's head, realizing the noble's idea is actually brilliant. Excited, he asks Lucy if anyone else can use her magic sword. However, the girl tells him no, as her father custom-made it so only she could wield. Disappointed, the young man scratches his head, lamenting that a good sword really makes all the difference. Losing his patience, the Baron orders Osborne to be brought out, but the boy reminds him that he's the fifth contestant, only for the noble to tell him to shut his mouth. Suddenly, a hooded man appears, stating he doesn't think it's his turn just yet. Ignoring him, the Lord demands he get rid of these ignorant fools, while the boy accuses him of using a mage even though it's forbidden. Glancing sideways, the mysterious man glares at him for a moment. The young man is caught off guard, unable to understand what's happening. The mage then tells the Baron that since they are still in the lead, it's better to wait, promising he will handle everything if the match ends in a tie. Worried, Cromwell wonders if Lucky could actually beat a mage, but McCung believes it would be a tough fight. The girl then asks him if he has a plan to defeat the cavalry, since they'll likely use them again. With a confident smirk, the mercenary tells her not to worry, as he has a trick up his sleeve. With that, the judge announces the fourth round between Knight Rumspell and McCung. The man steps into the arena with determination, glaring at his opponent. From the stands, the boy is shocked to realize he is completely unarmed. Beside him, the others wonder what he could possibly be thinking. Facing his opponent, the knight grows furious, asking if he's making a mockery of him. With his eyes glowing, McCung says they'll soon see what he's truly capable of. Suddenly, a golden aura envelopes his body as he prepares himself. The mercenary clenches his fist tightly, unleashing his full power. His body begins to transform, sprouting fur and sharp claws. His hands turn into the paws of a wild beast. With a roar, the transformation completes, revealing a massive tiger. In an instant, he turns into a creature that is half man, half beast. Shocked, the knight wonders if the bastard is a beast man. Terrified by the transformation, the opponent's horse rears up and neighs in panic. The knight struggles to control the animal, which loses its balance out of fear. Wasting no time, McCung charges forward with incredible speed. Running on all fours, he lunges toward the knight like a ravenous beast. The soldier gets annoyed, calling him a fool for attempting a head-on attack. Unshaken, the knight readies his spear and yells at him not to be underestimated. However, the beast man dodges the strike with astonishing agility. With a roar, the creature leaps forward and slashes the knight with his claws. The soldier can barely defend against the overwhelming blow. Stunned, he screams that it's impossible for him to possess such raw power. Without giving him time to recover, the beast strikes again, knocking him off his horse. Both hit the arena floor with a heavy thud. Landing on his feet, the beast man readies himself to keep fighting. From the stands, the Baron watches the scene completely frozen in shock. Lying on the ground, Knight Rumspell is unable to continue. With that, the judge declares McCung the winner, and the creature lets out a triumphant roar. Outraged, the Lord screams that it's cheating, but the boy asks why a troll was acceptable while a beast man isn't. Reverting to his human form, the mercenary stretches and complains about his aching body. Thrilled, the others congratulate him on the win, and Lucy admits she had no idea he was a beast man. Grit teeth tight, the noble watches the celebration with pure hatred. Infuriated, he yells that they won't win the final match and orders it to start immediately. In the center of the arena, the mage Osborne steps forward for the final round against Lucky. The mage stares down the boy with a cold, challenging glare. Indignantly, the young man accuses the lord of cheating, but the noble scoffs, saying he merely tweaked a few rules himself. With a smirk, the young man asks if that's really the case. In one swift motion, he leaps from the stands down into the arena. With a quick jump, the boy lands nimbly, ready to fight. He hits the ground with a dull thud, fully prepared for combat. Standing before the mage, the young man assumes a stance with an air of confidence. Confused, the Baron asks why he's stepping into the arena if the name on the list is Lucky, but the boy replies that it is his name. The Lord shouts that his name is LK, but the boy explains that it's just short for his real name. To prove it, he points to another mercenary named Lucky, explaining it's merely a coincidence. With a provocative smirk, the boy asks the noble if he's scared he'll actually beat the mage. The Baron is left speechless, but the mage cuts in, telling them to stop. With a cold gaze, Osborne orders the battle to begin at once. Facing his opponent, the young man can only smile with a trace of nervousness. In the middle of a packed arena, Lee Kale stands in silence, face to face with his opponent. As the crowd watches on, the young man keeps his eyes locked on the hooded figure. The hooded man then explains he's competing at his master's request, and asks why the boy is there too. Scratching his cheek, the youth awkwardly replies that it just kinda happened, since he needs to find a dragon heart. Baffled by the situation, he regrets landing in an unexpected wizard duel, and wonders what he's even doing there. Seeing this, the opponent accuses the boy of being arrogant, noticing he has no intention of answering the question properly. The rival then warns he'll see if the boy's skills match his big mouth and begins casting a spell. Caught off guard, Lee Kale tells him to hold on, claiming he isn't ready yet. Ignoring his plea, the attacker fires a magic missile spell straight at his rival. Reacting at the very last second, the young man grumbles about his luck and begins summoning his own magic. With a swift gesture, he makes his staff materialize out of thin air. The moment his hand grips the hilt, he readies himself to trade blows. He then unleashes a volley of magical projectiles to counter the enemy's spell. As the impact explodes right in front of him, the hooded man raises his staff to brace against the shockwave. Even through the smoke, the hooded man stares at the spot, unable to understand what just happened. As the dust settles, the young man emerges, smiling calmly. Staff in hand, the boy reveals himself fully protected by a magic barrier. Facing the defense, his opponent realizes the kid isn't all talk. Next, the rival challenges the boy, asking how he'll handle the next attack as he gathers magic in the air. Facing the new threat, Lee Kale stays alert to his opponent's movement. Soon, the hooded man begins summoning the element of fire in his hands. Without hesitation, the attacker fires a flame arrow straight at his rival. To halt the advance, the boy touches the ground and activates a magic circle in the arena. Right away, the kid casts an ice spear spell to intercept the strike. With that, the two elements collide in mid-air with tremendous force. The impact creates a massive explosion that echoes throughout the entire arena, wasting no time. The opponent chants a new spell while raising his weapon. Next, the man casts water blasts and lightning spells at the same time. Seeing this, the young man recognizes the double casting and deduces that his opponent is a high-level mage. Instantly, a sphere of water begins to take shape in the middle of the field. Quickly, the mass of water expands and gains rotational force. With that, the aquatic attack surges straight toward the boy. Looking up, the young man is surprised to see lightning gathering in the sky. Soon, he realizes his rival's plan. Soak him first, then electrocute him with a lightning strike. Without wasting a second, he raises his weapon and triggers a new magic circle. Next, Lee Kale simultaneously casts an ice storm and a lightning protection spell. Immediately, a massive whirlwind of ice wraps around the sphere of water in midair. Under the intense cold, the mass of water begins freezing completely mid-flight. In just a few seconds, the enemy attack is turned into a massive frozen sphere. At that moment, a bolt of lightning strikes down from the clouds straight to the ground. The electric blast directly hits the boy's barrier, which dissipates all the impact unharmed. Taking in the scene, the young man simply sighs, seeing that his defense worked. On the other side, his opponent stands shocked, unable to believe both of his spells were neutralized. Witnessing the clash, The entire crowd in the bleachers bursts into excited cheers. As applause echoes through the packed arena, the two fighters remain positioned in the center. In the stands, Cromwell praises the move, while Lucy complains of boredom, telling the boy to wrap it up already. Nearby, Baron Condemned stammers nervously, wondering if the mage is really going to lose the match. Back in the duel, the hooded man acknowledges that the kid is far from a beginner. Next, his rival accuses him of hiding his true skills, since he managed to counter a double casting. Brushing off the accusation, Lee Kuehl simply replies that he never hid anything from anyone. Looking at his weapon, the boy quietly reflects that the credit belongs to the staff of Cepheus and the stone embedded in. Soon, his opponent chants another spell and challenges him to try defending against the next hit. With a wave of his arms, the man raises a massive ball of fire above his head. Realizing the scale of the attack, the young man reacts in surprise at the imminent danger. Determined to end the fight, the mage shouts, calling upon the power of the flames. Next, his rival unleashes the flame explosion spell with full force. An overwhelming wave of fire sweeps rapidly across the battlefield, straight toward the boy. In the stands, spectators complain about the scorching heat, questioning if that level of magic isn't dangerous. Confident in his victory, the hooded man laughs out loud, mocking that the kid was unlucky to face him. Even surrounded by a storm of flames, the young man stands motionless and unharmed. With a single word, Lee Kuehl dispels all the fire around him. Seeing this, the hooded man screams, unable to comprehend how a level 5 spell could be negated so easily. Calmly, the boy explains with a smile that his rival's spell formula was full of loopholes. He then adds that he was able to cancel it all at once, leaving his opponent infuriated by his attitude. Without missing a beat, the young man announces it's his turn and summons a flame in the palm of his hand. Raising the mass of fire into the air, he challenges his rival to see if he can withstand his magic too. Seeing the attack take shape, the man steps back in shock at what he's about to face. In the next second, Lee Kuehl hurls his fireball from above straight at the mage. Desperately trying to react, his opponent attempts to use the same dispelling magic against the incoming attack. However, the rival realizes the flame isn't disappearing and grows anxious at the situation. Watching it rapidly approach, the hooded man stares at the imminent danger. Panicking, the mage screams, unable to understand why his dispel failed. At the very last split second, the man stammers out a shield spell to protect himself. With a loud boom, the fireball slams into the barrier, triggering a massive explosion on the field. As the smoke clears, the hooded man manages to stay on his feet behind his shield. In the stands, the roar of the crowd echoes through the stadium once again. Visibly exhausted, his opponent groans from the strain while trying to catch his breath. Unable to accept what just happened, his rival stammers in disbelief, asking how that was even possible. While the boy stands firm on the field, the mage asks in shock where he had learned that kind of magic. As the battle rages on, it's recalled that dragons are the origin of all existing magic. Because of this, elves, fairies, and beastkin were the first to learn these arts from the legendary creatures. It is then revealed that humanity eventually learned to master this knowledge through those 3 races. In a past lesson, Sephirs explained that although human creativity grew from learning from various races, their formulas became overly complicated. Smiling, the elf added that all this synthesized knowledge was being passed down to Lee Kuehl. Remembering the grueling training, the young man used to grit his teeth while taking it all in. Back then, the boy would scream in desperation, begging to be let out of that training. Watching him, his master thoughtfully remarked that the method didn't seem to be working. Right after, the woman suggested restarting the entire history of dragons from the very beginning, making her students scream in despair. Back in the present, the young man smiles awkwardly, asking why he should reveal any of that to his rival. Impressed, the hooded man admits he had never seen or heard of a formula like that before. Despite this, the rival scoffs, calling it a cheap trick and claiming he will never truly evolve that way. Ignoring the provocation, the boy suggests the man should worry about his own situation instead. With his face contorted in anger, his opponent calls him an arrogant brat. Raising his staff into the air, the mage promises to show him his ultimate magic. With his weapon raised, the hooded man activates a massive magic glyph in the air. The young man reacts instantly, shielding his face with his arm against the blinding light. Right after, his opponent shouts, summoning an elemental conjurer. Several blocks of ice begin gathering on the field to form a creature. In moments, the monster's head shapes itself with a menacing glare. Once the creature is complete, his rival shows off the result, telling the boy to behold his magic. Though impressed, Lee Kyul comments that the spell is strong for level 5, but questions if calling it ultimate isn't an exaggeration. Mocking him, the mage laughs out loud and challenges the boy to face his specialty in ice magic. Smiling with confidence, the young man accepts the challenge, warning that he'll do the exact same thing. At that instant, he summons his own ultimate elemental conjurer magic. With that, a vortex of flames erupts, engulfing his entire body. Behind him, a massive creature made entirely of fire rises in the middle of the arena. Wasting no time, the frozen monster charges forward with raised fists to attack. On the other side, the creature of flames surges forward at the same speed to intercept the strike. With a colossal impact, the two giants clash fists in the center of the field. As the two giants clash, the intense heat begins to melt the ice structure. Driven by the flaming force, the frozen monster's arm begins to give way and crumble. Watching the spectacle, the crowd in the stands cheers uncontrollably. Thrilled by the fight, the hooded man shouts that it was a good move, but insists the boy will still lose. Despite the enemy's resistance, the fire creature keeps pushing forward, driving its rival back. Smiling calmly, Lee Kyul retorts that it's nothing to him. Then, the young man notes that in the end, it all comes down to a clash of energy. Gaining more power, the fiery creature begins to crack the opponent's body. Determined to end the fight, the boy channels more energy to settle the outcome once and for all. With that surge, the flame monster lands a clean hit, breaking right through the enemy's defense. Moments later, the fire completely consumes the frozen structure in the middle of the arena. Seeing his summon destroyed, the opponent screams in shock, unable to believe his eyes. With that, the entire ice creature shatters into thousands of fragments raining down on the floor. Hit by the shockwave, the mage staggers back, groaning from the sheer exertion. Approaching his kneeling rival, the boy calmly asks if he'd like to continue the duel. With victory virtually sealed, Lee Kyul stands at the center of the arena, holding his staff. Still on his knees, the hooded man asks if the boy belongs to the inner circle of the Sage Tower. The mage insists there's no reason to hide it, claiming it would be impossible to pull off such feats at his age without being part of that order. Scratching his neck, the young man says he doesn't know what he's talking about, and asks if his rival admits defeat. From high in the stands, Baron Condemned shouts, demanding that his representative not give up under any circumstances. Ignoring the noble's desperate cries, the opponent begins to declare his surrender. Before everyone, the man concludes by saying he accepts his defeat in the duel. Hearing the declaration, the noble's jaw drops, completely unable to accept the result. Over the arena's sound system, Lucky is officially announced as the grand winner of the match. Celebrating the victory, Cromwell and the other mercenaries hug the young man, but he asks for a moment before celebrating. Looking up at the VIP box, the boy reminds Baron Condemned of the promise they made in case of victory. Then, the boy demands the payout owed to the victims, and the multiplied compensation for the monster parts sold on the market. Choking on despair, the noble complains about his losses while his servant tries to tend to him on the balcony. In the stands, the warriors call on everyone to party at the inn, and drain the tavern's kegs dry. As he watches the excitement around him, Lee Kyul looks around and wonders where Lucy went. Opening the wooden door, Lee Kyul steps into the room looking for the girl. Glancing toward the corner of the room, something catches his eye. There, Lucy is curled up, sleeping peacefully. Slowly opening her eyes, the half-elf sleepily asks if the fight is already over. Patting her head, the young man smiles and confirms that they came out victorious. Sometime later, the duo continues their journey down a tree-lined road. Holding the pouch of coins he got, the boy celebrates, saying it's fantastic. Beside him, Lucy asks if he was really allowed to take the money like that, but the young man reasons that he needed compensation for everything he did. Walking down the trail, the half-elf mentions reading that arena battles require nobles to stake their titles, so the loser has to honor the deal. Curious, the boy asks about the book, wondering if it's that guide for elves in the human world. Suddenly, A voice from down the road calls out, asking the pair to wait. A carriage quickly approaches and screeches to a halt on the dirt path. From the driver's seat, Mage calls out that he finally caught up with them, taking the boy by surprise. Stepping out of the cabin, Elysian complains that they were worried about their sudden disappearance, while the boy explains he left to avoid causing more trouble in town. The strong man passes along the mercenary's gratitude, prompting the boy to return the kindness and ask if it was really all right for the two of them to leave town like that. Macon explains that Cromwell will handle the payment and send the money with the caravan as soon as he gets it. Scratching his chin, the boy asks where they're headed, revealing that he's traveling northeast for now. Surprised, the travelers mention they're on their way to the Great Temple of Crownguas and invite the boy to join them since they're heading the same way. Hearing the offer, Lee Kuel reacts with surprise at the idea of traveling together. Inside the vehicle, Lucy cheers that she won't have to walk anymore, leaving the young man stunned to see she has already made herself at home. Thinking it over, he agrees that for his first adventure, it would be better to have company and avoid walking everywhere. As the carriage sets off toward the mountains, the boy thanks Macon for taking them in and receives a friendly reply in return. Examining the map in the palm of his hand, Lee Kuel notes that the signal points northeast, but the girl warns him that the device fails at short range. Incredulous, the young man complains that the device was useless anyway, prompting the half-elf to ask if he's mocking her father's skill. With an air of superiority, the girl guarantees she can sense the item's presence if it's nearby, asking if he really thought her father sent her for no reason. Catching the drift, the boy realizes he'll have to travel alongside that troublesome girl until the very end. Changing the subject, the boy asks if her companion shouldn't head back because of her mother, while Elysian listens to the conversation in silence. Remembering their departure, the young girl explains that her mother permitted the trip and that Ryard only asked her to bring back gifts. Frowning, the young man gets annoyed, realizing that no one there seems to take the mission seriously. Inside the moving vehicle, the boy complains about the way things are going, but Macon demands that everyone stay quiet during the ride. Suddenly, the boy covers his mouth as the carriage sways violently. Feeling motion sick, Lee Kuel reaches out for support while Elysian offers to help, and Lucy tries to push the priestess away. The carriage continues its path along the dirt road surrounded by trees. Moments later, the boy is lying on the priestess' lap while she takes care of him. Embarrassed, the boy asks if it's really okay for him to lie there, and the woman gently replies that it's no problem at all. Her companion ponders that he must not be used to traveling, while the young man admits he rarely goes out, and the half-elf teases him from the side. Curious about the lively conversation, Macon asks what they're talking about, and the boy explains they're searching for an artifact requested by his master. Feeling like he's about to fall asleep in that position, Lee Kuel is interrupted by Elysian asking if he really belonged to the inner circle of the Sage Tower. Sitting up quickly, the young man remembers his old rival mentioned that, and asks what this tower and group actually are. Macon is shocked that a mage wouldn't know about the institution, while the boy justifies that he spent his life studying in an isolated place. The strongman explains that the massive structure sits at the center of the continent, housing students and magic researchers. He then adds that at the top of the tower, the 7 sages personally instruct their chosen disciples. These direct apprentices are precisely the members known as the Inner Circle. The driver ponders that youths with such talent usually come from there, prompting the boy to praise his knowledge. Taking advantage of the topic, Lee Kuel asks if he knows the location of the Kingdom of Elune and a specific Marquez. With that, the driver unfolds the map of the continent of Arsenia to show him the region. Looking at the illustration, the young man finally learns the name of the continent he's on. Pointing with his finger, the traveler shows that the neighboring kingdom is indeed their destination, and their current route will take them right there. The driver asks if that noble title belongs to that nation, and the boy confirms it's his master's place of origin. Looking at the ring on his hand, the boy silently hopes that everything goes smoothly, and the desired object is there. Shifting his focus, he asks why the duo is heading to the Grand Temple, making the priestess hesitate. Holding the cross to her chest, Elysian sincerely reveals that she received a sacred prophecy. Surprised, Lee Kuel asks if a prophecy isn't a message sent to the saints, and the woman replies that she's heading there because she believes that's the case. Not wanting to pry, the young man says he won't ask any more questions, only to be interrupted by the half-elf complaining about being hungry. Looking at the evening sky, Mage comments on how late it's getting. The driver warns that they'll need to set up camp and suggests finding a spot for dinner, getting help from the priestess. With the campfire lit, a cauldron filled with food begins to boil at the campsite. Elysian hands a bowl of soup to the boy, who thanks her for the kindness and tells his companion to eat slower. Around the campfire, the boy asks how much longer until they reach the city, and the strong man answers that the journey will take 4 days. The girl questions the detour on their route, but the driver explains that their food supply will run out quickly. Suddenly, the half-elf's expression changes as she catches a suspicious noise nearby. Instantly dropping into a guard stance, the girl alerts her companions that someone is approaching. Right after, the sound of rustling bushes echoes through the dense woods. A stranger emerges from the darkness with his hands up, introducing himself as an adventurer and asking to join their camp. The individual claims it would be safer to stay together, but the girl reacts suspiciously, revealing she noticed 5 other men hiding in the woods. Caught off guard by the revelation, the stranger stammers and tries to laugh it off awkwardly. Completely shifting his attitude, the intruder flashes a wicked smile and regrets having to settle things by force. Without warning, the intruder hurls a sharp dagger straight toward the group. The blade grazes past Lee Kuel, who recoils in shock at the speed of the attack. Reacting just in time, Lucy blocks the strike in midair and scolds the boy for standing frozen. Frustrated by her defense, the attacker clicks his tongue as his move fails. Regaining his composure, the young man demands to know who the intruder is. In response, the man retorts that he can ask that in hell as he unleashes a hail of blades. To protect everyone, the boy activates his shield magic and deflects the projectiles in midair. Hiding among the trees, several archers appear, ordering the immediate death of the mage while commanding to spare the women. At that exact moment, a volley of arrows is fired from the darkness toward the travelers. Raising his staff, Lee Kuel swiftly activates a protection spell against ordinary projectiles. Upon impact with the magic, all the arrows freeze in midair and drop harmlessly to the ground. Infuriated by the ambush, the young man warns that the attackers have made him furious. Relentlessly, the boy casts a killing cloud spell straight toward the bushes. Engulfed by the toxic smoke, the leader of the intruders gapes at the poisonous gas, wondering how the spell was cast so quickly. Returning the previous taunt, the young man snaps back, telling them they can ask that question in hell. Amidst the darkness of the forest, the group remains on guard around the campfire in complete silence. The boy asks about his companion's night vision, hearing from the strong man that his beast-like sight is superior, which the half-elf confirms. With a swift motion, Lee Kuel summons a water sphere spell right over his palm. In the next instant, the water douses the embers, completely extinguishing the fire. With the flame gone, the campsite area is plunged into total darkness. Looking up, the young man activates his own night vision magic. Severely affected by the poison in the air, the intruders groan in pain and scream to run away. A magic missile spell shoots toward one of the escapees, taking him down with a direct hit. Leaping out of nowhere, another man ambushes the boy with an axe from behind, declaring his back is wide open. Without showing a hint of surprise, the young man glances back and asks if he truly believes that. With an agile move, the boy fires a wind blade, slicing the attacker down. Screams and the sound of battle echo through the moonlit forest. Shortly after, Lucy drags the captured leader over and asks if everyone is all right, receiving a positive response from the group. Looking at the defeated men, the travelers dismiss the idea that Baron Condemned sent them, as they are far too weak. Shaking the prisoner violently, the half-elf demands that he wake up, while the boy questions the brutality of her method. Lying on the ground, the prisoner spits to the side in utter contempt. With a mocking grin, the man threatens that they'll regret messing with the Dark Brotherhood. Reacting instantly, Lucy calls out his bluff and demands he tell them everything if he doesn't want a beating, prompting the boy to ask her to refrain from violence. Under the night sky, the intruder begins recounting his version of the story. Lee Kuel summarizes the tale, explaining that dark mages forced them to kidnap people to work in the mines, and they tried to do the same when they stumbled upon them. Thoughtful, Macon warns that the escape of one of the bandits might attract the dark mages to them, asking if the situation is dangerous. Bothered by the mention of their enemies, the girl mutters something that catches the young man's attention. With a grim look on her face, the half-elf firmly declares that she will never forgive the dark mages. As the girl vents, the narrative introduces the terrifying dark mages. It is explained that ordinary mages use environmental mana to cast their spells. On the other hand, dark practitioners use demonic energy by making pacts with evil beings, gaining power by sacrificing living souls. These figures became feared and despised by everyone on the continent. Gritting her teeth, the half-elf swears she will destroy them all. Curious about her reaction, the boy asks why she's so angry, and the priestess explains that elves are the main victims in these rituals. Shocked by the revelation, the young man realizes that his companion was not a dragon after all. Silently, the boy admits with surprise that he thought she was just pretending to be an elf, concluding that she is the daughter of a dragon and an elf. He hears the girl tell him never to lower his guard in the middle of the woods. Wanting to better understand his companion, the young man pats her head and promises to be more careful, leaving the girl surprised by the affection. Blushing, the half-elf merely murmurs that what matters is that he understood the warning. As they discuss their next steps, Elysian states her duty to report the facts to the temple, and the group decides to stop by a village along the way. Lucy stretches sleepily, making the boy laugh at her mood shift while the strong man offers to keep watch for the night. Kindly, the boy announces he will cast a protective barrier so everyone can rest in peace. With that, the campfire continues to burn softly in the tranquility of the night. Lying down to rest, Lee Kuel reflects that the day was exhausting and that he would have died if it weren't for magic. Thinking of his homeland, the young man wishes to return home and wonders if he will be able to catch up with school again. Gradually, the boy closes his eyes and falls into a deep sleep. The night moves peacefully under the soft moonlight. The next morning, the half-elf stretches excitedly, while the boy complains of aches from sleeping outside the carriage. Then, the journey resumes with the prisoners tied up and dragged behind the vehicle. As time passes, the sun begins to set on the horizon between the mountains. The carriage finally reaches the entrance of a fortified village. At the gate, a guard orders everyone to stop and demands the group's identification. From his seat, Makan explains he came to the location to meet with Kara. From high up in the tower, a deep voice asks who is calling his name. Soon after, a warrior wearing a red cloak reveals himself before everyone. Recognizing the driver, Carrick smiles and asks what brings him to that village. The priestess recalls it has been 2 years since they last saw each other, receiving a warm greeting from the man. Taking advantage of the young woman's arrival, Carrick immediately asks her to examine some sick villagers, leaving her surprised. As night falls over the church, groans of pain echo from inside the temple. Lying in bed, the injured man struggles to breathe due to the wounds across his body. One of those present recognizes the priestess and asks about the chances of healing, receiving a plea for patience while she examines the injury. Examining the deep cut on his shoulder, the severity of the patient's condition becomes clear. Analyzing the injury up close, the young woman confirms the extreme gravity of the wound. Makan suggests everyone wait outside to let the healing work take place, being greeted by a woman who comments on their time apart. Outside, a round of introductions is proposed among the members who don't know each other yet. Makan introduces himself as a mercenary and mentions his companion tending to the patient, followed by the 2 young men stating their names. The local leader takes the floor, explaining he is the village chief and recalling their old friendship from his mercenary days. Right after, the female warrior introduces herself as a mercenary and warmly greets the newcomers. Observing her friendly demeanor, the boy silently reflects on the beauty of the woman he just met. Embarrassed, the boy wearing a cloak and carrying a staff stammers as he says his name is Rookie. Lee Kuel asks if he had used emergency healing magic and questions if the mages there didn't know how to perform restorations. The boy excuses himself, saying he actually knows the spell, but the process is specific to the mage class. He recalls a lesson where Sephirs explained that healing others is complex and less effective for mages, leaving the role to divine servants. Scratching his cheek, Lee Kuel agrees that healing is inefficient for mages and wonders why he would waste time learning. The apprentice is impressed by his knowledge, stating that beginners don't know this fact but gets shocked when the young man asks why he assumed he was a beginner. Stunned, the boy finds it impossible for him to already be at an intermediate level at his age, But here's the young man counter that the boy himself is one too. After all, most intermediate-level practitioners are usually elderly men. While the apprentice feels annoyed by encountering another prodigy besides himself, the young man silently concludes that he didn't like that boy at all. Inside the temple, Elysian kneels beside the injured man and begins the restoration spell. Under the touch of the priestess's hands, the deep chest wound gradually begins to close. With a focused gaze, the young woman channels all her divine energy into the healing process. Outside, the female mercenary reports that she was accompanying the young mage in investigating the dark practitioners when their other companions were captured without explanation. The boy reveals the existence of a magic stone mine on the mountain, making the strong man indignant over the smuggling of a government-controlled resource. Li Kuel warns that the village is close to the mine and will suffer another invasion soon, frightening the boy with the strength of the enemies. Karak intends to warn the population about the attack, but Makan warns that the news will cause widespread panic. The female mercenary agrees that creating disagreements will only make things worse, while the young man walks away, tired of that argument. Watching the young man step away from the conversation, Lucy looks at him, intrigued. In the background, silence reigns over the village houses under the moonlight. Sitting on the grass, Li Kuel vents in silence, wanting to end everything and go back home, as he was just an ordinary student in his homeland. Feeling nostalgic, the young man misses the food from his world and wonders when was the last time he ate instant ramen. While watching the village from the hilltop, the young man hears a noise coming from the bush beside him. Instantly on high alert, he raises his staff, suspecting an ambush. Pointing his weapon at the bushes, the boy orders whoever is there to reveal themselves immediately. Slowly, a pair of feet wearing sandals emerges from the vegetation. A shy little girl appears among the leaves, looking apprehensive. Relieved to see it was just a child, Li Kuel apologizes, saying he thought it was a villain. Kneeling down to talk at her eye level, the young man asks if she lives there and what her name is, listening to the girl reply that her name is Marie. Delighted, the little girl asks if she can touch the object while already holding it, making the young man laugh as he notices the gesture. To please the little one, the boy casts a continuous light spell in the palm of his hand. Small, glowing spheres begin to float in the air around them, enchanting the child. The girl opens a wide, surprised smile as she sees the magical display. While she jumps around trying to reach the lights, the young man asks why she is there alone and where her parents are. Upon hearing the question about her family, the little girl stops jumping immediately and stands motionless in silence. Lowering her head in tears, Marie says her parents were fighting against bad men. The little girl cries, saying they were killed, making Li Kuel try to calm her down by promising to show her something amazing. With a snap of his fingers, the young man casts a simple illusion spell. Before them appears the projection of a huge, spinning carousel, tricking the child's eyes. The girl is fascinated as she contemplates the luminous spectacle. Marie asks in surprise what that is and if she can visit the place, hearing the young man explain that it is a carousel from another world and that she can go when she grows up. Excited, the little girl declares she will learn magic, making the boy ask if she wants to learn how to create a carousel. The little one firmly denies it and asserts that she wants to learn spells to defeat the bad men. The young man is amazed by such determination coming from someone so young. In silence, he gently holds the girl's hand to offer his support. In front of an illuminated carousel, little Marie reveals her desire to learn magic so she can kill the villains. Her response leaves Li Kuel visibly taken aback. Even so, he promises that her appa will fix everything. Just then, Lucy suddenly appears and asks what they are doing there. The newcomer accuses him of making the child cry, but he instantly denies it, explaining that no one cried. Marie then becomes fascinated by the adventurer's pointed ears and asks if she can touch them, but gets an immediate, annoyed refusal. Li Kuel scolds her for being so cold to a child, but Lucy just tells him to shut up. Intimidated, the boy instantly agrees, secretly admitting to himself that he wanted to touch her ears a little too. From afar, Elysian yells at them, calling them brats, and announces she's finished healing, ordering them to come back. Hearing the call, the half-elf repeats the word, brats, and tells LK it's time to go. Little Marie, however, remains silent with a sad expression. As the group begins to walk away, Li Kuel notices the girl is following them. Suddenly, the child starts running toward the village, making him shout her name. Worried, he wonders aloud if she is really going home. The girl was running toward an old stone building that stood out under the night sky. Inside, a mercenary with a bandaged chest wakes up and asks what happened to the rest of his squad. Jenny informs him that everyone died and that he was lucky the priestess healed him in time to avoid the same fate. The man turns to Rookie and asks if they managed to catch the bastard mage who attacked them. With a face full of rage, the warrior vows to avenge his comrades by killing the enemy. Elysian approaches and insists he still needs to rest, but the man says he's grateful for the help, but has no time for that. Meanwhile, a commotion causes Lee Kuel and the others to rush to the center of the village. On the way, they run into Karak, who asks what's going on. The village chief breaks down the doors and runs outside. Out there, he sees the entire place in flames and realizes those bastards are after the villagers. Desperate, Lee Kuel spots Marie running alone toward the fire and shouts her name. Without a second thought, he dashes after her, while Lucy yells, asking where he's going. Nearby, Rookie declares they need to protect the villagers, and Jenny says she'll go along to guard the bratty mage. The wounded warrior also insists he can't just stand by and will fight, so the other mercenary asks Elysian to tend to the wounded. The scene outside is pure destruction, with bodies of villagers scattered everywhere. Amidst the rubble, bloody and injured villagers appear from the surprise attack. Horrified by the sight, Lee Kuel realizes they mercilessly murdered those helpless people. Through the fire, he runs frantically, calling for Marie and begging her to say something if she's okay. Suddenly, he hears a scream nearby. Startled, the young man turns toward the sound. He finds the girl being held by two brutes, one of them suggesting they kill her quickly as ordered. The other disagrees, saying they could take her to be used as a test subject or sacrifice. Before they can act, an air bomb spell hits one of the captors dead on. The spell was cast by Lee Kuel, who now glares at them, staff in hand. With the path clear, he shouts for Marie to run to him. The girl runs toward him, but one of the enemies recognizes him as the mage the survivor mentioned and orders him killed first. Undeterred, the young man gathers a massive amount of energy in the palm of his hand. Focusing hard, he channels all the arcana energy into a single point. He then fires a powerful blast of energy at his opponents. The attack strikes the group full force, knocking them back with the impact. Seeing this, one of the enemies shouts not to retreat and to stop him from casting more magic, while Lucy orders her companions to charge. With her sword drawn, Lucy prepares to join the fight alongside her allies. The half-elf swiftly rushes forward, taking down several enemies at once with precise strikes. Shocked by the resistance, the enemies question how these bastards could be so strong. Taking advantage of the distraction, lightning is cast, instantly electrocuting a group of foes. With the situation under control, Rookie approaches and anxiously asks if Lucy is hurt anywhere. Seeing the reinforcements, Lee Kuel sighs in relief and shouts that Jenny has finally arrived to help. The scene annoys the mercenary, who wonders why the boy worries about Lucy when he was the one surrounded. At the same time, Rookie gets annoyed that Lee Kuel only called for Jenny, even though he helped too. Terrified, the enemies realize there are two mages and decide they need to warn Marcus and retreat immediately. As the battle settles down, the boy turns to Carrick, expresses relief that he's okay, and asks if he can leave the child with him. Lucy watches the interaction, realizing he came all this way alone just because of that girl. However, Marie refuses, saying the chief is scary and that she wants to stay with her Appa while he tries to calm her down. Tearfully, the little girl screams that her parents said the same thing before they never came back. Her words leave him speechless and visibly shaken. To reassure her, Lee Kuel makes a promise, swearing that mages never lie. Pinky promising her, Lee Kuel vows to avenge Marie's parents. Carrick then assures him he will protect the child and tells him to go help the others fighting further down, to which the boy agrees. Lucy teases him, asking if he plans to rush ahead alone again, but the young man stammers that he'll go with everyone. Meanwhile, the mercenaries continue to fight bravely against the invaders. The newly recovered warrior also pushes forward with his sword and shield to hold back the enemy advance. One enemy shouts that they're too strong, but another orders them to keep fighting since they have the numbers. Suddenly, a massive fireball is hurled toward the battlefield. The spell explodes amidst the group of foes, blasting several of them away. Turning around, Lee Kuel finds Maken and calls out to him, relieved to see him. The man observes that most of the Dark Brotherhood seems to be here, but the real threat is a dark mage he hasn't seen yet. At that moment, a hooded figure appears and casts a diamond dust spell. The spell hits one of the mercenaries, who begins to freeze in sheer desperation. Within seconds, sharp ice crystals pierce and cover his entire body. His eyes widen one last time before being completely consumed by ice. Moments later, the man's frozen body shatters into countless pieces. The brutal scene leaves Lee Kuel horrified, making him think those stupid thugs never end up being useful. Among the debris, the dark mage emerges with a smirk, asking if they were looking for him. The boy glares at him, realizing he must be the dark mage they were talking about. With an air of superiority, the figure reveals his name is Lupus, the second disciple of Marcus, and says he's only telling them because they're about to die. Unfazed, Lee Kuel scoffs and says that in that case, he's nothing more than small fry. The provocation enrages Lupus, who calls him an arrogant bastard. The hooded mage quickly begins gathering energy in his hands. He then fires a powerful ice lance directly at his opponent. Without hesitation, the young man prepares to counter, gathering his own energy. He releases his arcane cannon to intercept the attack. Lee Kuel's magic collides with the ice lance, completely shattering it on impact. The energy cannon continues its trajectory and explodes against the roof of a nearby building. Shocked by what just happened, the dark mage screams, demanding to know what he just did. With the situation temporarily under control, the boy asks Maken to take care of the rest while he handles Lupus, and the man agrees. With a mocking smirk, the young man asks if the small fry saw that, telling him to go call his master since he's no match for him. Right after, he thinks to himself that he only said that to provoke him. The taunt works, and wrapped in a fury aura, Lupus glares at the boy, who realizes things aren't looking good. With his hands together, the dark mage begins casting an ice storm. Lupus then unleashes the spell, creating an overwhelming blizzard around him. To defend himself, Lee Kuel's staff glows intensely with a new energy. The young man then conjures a massive wall of fire to block the incoming attack. The flames rise and collide violently with the ice storm, neutralizing the spell. Engulfed in fire, Lee Kuel reaches out his hand with a confident look. With his face twisted in rage, the hooded mage calls him a bastard. Surprised, Lupus asks if he's a dark mage too, but the young man replies that he only grew strong through studying and practice. The youth casually whistles. With a confident smirk, he thinks to himself that this isn't as hard as he imagined, and that he was nervous for nothing. In disbelief, the enemy screams that he can't accept this, but Lee Kuel taunts him, asking what he's going to do about it. Filled with hatred, Lupus declares that he will die right there, and fires a volley of ice arrows. Unfazed, the boy conjures a magic shield that blocks all the projectiles. Seeing his opponent's fury, he says he'll try to guess the reason for so much anger. He then deduces that the other got tired of calculating and gathering mana, turning to dark magic as an easy way out, but now feels ashamed for not being able to beat a mage like him. Enraged, the dark mage screams at him to shut his mouth. Next, Lupus hurls a powerful ice bomb in his direction. Undeterred, Lee Kuel prepares a magic circle to counterattack. The young man then unleashes a barrage of fire arrows against the enemy spell. The sheer power of the attack leaves his opponent completely shocked. With an air of superiority, the youth reasons that by making a pact with a demon, the enemy will never get any stronger than he already is. He then firmly declares that, unlike his opponent, he will reach level 9 one day. The hooded mage bursts into laughter and screams that he won't live to see that day. Desperate, Lupus orders all his men to attack and kill that bastard. The boy calls him mediocre for having to rely on numbers to try and defeat him. With a confident smirk, he asks if the enemy isn't forgetting something. The man just stares back, confused, asking what he's talking about. At that moment, Lucy leaps through the air behind the mage for a surprise attack. Taking advantage of the distraction, Lee Kuel fires a magic missile spell at the bandits. The attack hits the enemies dead on, while the half-elf charges straight at Lupus. Desperate, Lupus conjures a magical barrier to try and protect himself. Mid-air, Lucy shouts the name of her sword, Ryard, readying her strike. Instantly, the blade is engulfed in intense flames. Terrified, The dark mage realizes it's a magic sword. To defend himself, he raises a massive ice shield toward the girl. Without hesitation, the half-elf comes crashing down with all her might. With that, the fiery strike lunges directly against the ice defense. The flaming sword hits the shield head-on, creating a powerful impact. Right after, the ice barrier begins to crack under the pressure. The mage watches in shock as his defense starts to give way. Cracks rapidly spread across the entire frozen surface. With a shout, the girl concentrates all her energy into the final blow. In an instant, the shield shatters into countless pieces. Seeing his defense broken, the dark mage panics, realizing there is no escape. Seizing the opening, Lucy hits him with a clean punch right between the legs. With no time for the enemy to react, the girl strikes the back of his neck with the pommel of her sword. The flaming strike explodes against the mage's face, blowing him backward from the impact. As he falls, spitting a black substance, Lupus laments that he can't die like this. With one last breath, his hand falls lifeless at his side. Lucy then lands and observes the defeated enemy on the ground, her sword still ablaze. Seeing their leader defeated, the bandits panic and shout for everyone to run away. Soon, the half-elf turns to Lee and asks if he's all right, as he seemed to be struggling. Exhausted, the young man reflects on how the path of magic is an endless and increasingly complex maze. He continues his monologue, thinking that while some work hard, others always choose the easy way out. The youth then concludes that great power doesn't mean strength, and that one must learn to control it on their own. Supported by the girl, Lee says he managed to handle it, but regrets that he still hasn't seen their master. Seeing the village still in flames, the young man sighs, frustrated at not having even a second to rest. With the sky already darkening, he tells Lucy they need to go, and she agrees. Suddenly, a new figure emerges from the fire, calling them insects and asking if they still intend to fight. At the ready, Jenny knocks her bow and aims a triple arrow at the new opponent. Without hesitating, Jenny fires a volley of arrows at the enemy. With a mocking smile, the man says it doesn't matter how many times she shoots, because his spell protects him from normal projectiles. With that, the arrows stop in mid-air, blocked by an invisible barrier. Moments later, the projectiles simply deflect and fall to the ground without dealing any damage. Before Rookie's shocked gaze, the opponent shouts once more that it's useless. He then declares it's his turn and hurls multiple fireballs, challenging them to survive. Seeing this, the young mage is stunned to realize the enemy is using double casting. Without wasting time, Rookie conjures a shield to protect himself and his companion. Right away, the fiery spheres relentlessly bombard the protective barrier. As he strains himself, he can hardly believe the man can use fireballs in rapid succession like that. The opponent scoffs, saying he holds up pretty well for a kid, and promises his next attack will be even more special. With a tense look, the boy realizes his shield won't be able to hold out much longer. With that, the enemy unleashes an overwhelming wave of fire toward them. At the last second, however, an ice shield appears out of nowhere and completely blocks the flames. The sudden intervention leaves the man completely taken aback. Lee appears in front of his companions and asks if the two of them are okay. With an annoyed glare, Jenny sarcastically asks if they look okay, while Rookie takes offense at being called a kid. The young man then wonders to himself why she keeps calling him that when she knows it's not true. Soon, the young mage asks who the hell that man is, and the mercenary identifies him as a level 5 dark mage named Glowin. Hearing this, Lee butts in to say he's also level 5, leaving the other incredulous at what he just said. The enemy, in turn, grumbles as he realizes a few more bastards have shown up. However, his gaze fixes on the weapon at Lucy's waist, wondering if that could be a magic sword. In an authoritative tone, Glowin demands that the half-elf hand over the sword, but she just stares at him and asks what he'll do if she refuses. He then replies that he'll simply kill her to take the weapon, though it would be a waste with a face like. At that moment, the other mage interrupts and asks if he's also a disciple of Marcus, just like Lupus was. With a sneer, the man confirms he is the Abyssal Mage's first disciple, and introduces himself as Glowin. He then notices he can't find Lupus anywhere, and Lee informs him that his companion is already dead. Glowin rejoices at the news, saying he wasn't happy that Lupus had made a contract with a stronger demon. Even so, he claims he will avenge his companion's death with theirs, and that he will be the one responsible for their end. With a sadistic look, the dark mage begins to gather a massive amount of fire energy between his hands. In an instant, Glowin fires a powerful flamethrower toward the group. However, Lucy pushes Lee Kyul back and declares that she will fight him. With that, the girl draws her sword, which immediately bursts into flames. She then shouts the name of her weapon, Ryard, unleashing its full power. Next, the half-elf charges forward with her blazing blade ready to strike. Her fiery strike collides head-on with the enemy's flamethrower. Surprised by her strength, the dark mage conjures a barrier of flames to protect himself. The power of the attack, however, breaks through the defense and blows Glowin away. With a determined look, the girl keeps pressing forward without hesitation. She leaps into the air to continue her pursuit of the opponent. In disbelief, he wonders how her magic sword could be so powerful. Watching the scene, Lee Kyul reflects that the sword's power must be enhanced by Lucy's natural affinity for fire. Suddenly, the half-elf stops and says she can smell something familiar. With her face full of hatred, she screams that she smells elven blood on all his magic and demands to know how many were sacrificed. With a mocking smirk, the man asks why she's so worked up, considering she's nothing more than a half-elf. Indignant, Lee Kyul shouts that the dark mage is the one who should read the room, calling him a third-rate nobody. The young man then accuses him of having only learned attack magic with strong affinities like fire and ice, just like Lupus did. Suddenly, a new voice emerges from the shadows and questions if Glowin would truly be capable of killing him with those skills. Soon, an old mage with a long white beard reveals himself, commenting on the presence of an unfamiliar mage he's never seen before. Seeing the new figure, the youth apprehensively wonders where that man could have come from. Undeterred, the dark mage hurls two massive fireballs straight at her. Nimbly, Lucy leaps between the projectiles to press her attack. Seeing her close the distance, Glowin erects a wall of fire to block her path. The half-elf, however, isn't shaken by the barrier of flames. Vaulting forward, she leaps right over the fire to keep up her assault. The unexpected move catches the enemy completely off guard. With no time to waste, he begins casting a magic circle for a far more powerful spell. Right after, Glowin unleashes a hellish inferno that engulfs the entire area. The force of the explosion blows the adventurer back, forcing her to retreat. Noticing her frustration, Lee Kyul calms her down, telling her not to be impatient since that spell won't last long. He explains that while the spell is powerful, they'll be completely safe as long as they stay out of its range. He calculates that the mage will drain his mana and won't be able to attack anymore, leaving him wide open. Out loud, Lee Kyul advises Glowin to use a teleportation spell to retreat as soon as the magic wears off. Hearing this, Rookie asks why he's giving advice to the enemy, but the guy just asks if there's really any mage who doesn't know the basics. With a smirk, the young man finishes his thought, saying there are probably mages who don't even know how to use teleportation. Incredulous, Rookie wonders how someone casting a spell like Hellfire wouldn't know basic teleportation, but Lee Kyul explains it's a side effect of cheating to level up. Hearing this, the young mage flies into a rage, shouting that all those bastards who cheated to level up should be punished. The comment makes the other feel uneasy, guilt-tripping him about his own training and his urge to use the dragon heart. Exhausted and straining, Glowin can barely keep the spell active any longer. Suddenly, the magic collapses, and the backlash knocks him backward, leaving him utterly vulnerable. Seeing the opening, Lucy shouts that now is the time to strike and rushes the enemy. Panicking, the dark mage realizes there's no way to dodge the incoming blow. With a determined smile, the girl says there's no escape as she prepares for the final blow. However, a sudden blade of wind is conjured, catching the half-elf completely by surprise mid-strike. Stomping firmly on the ground, a new figure cuts off her advance. The gust of wind blasts the adventurer back, pushing her far away from her target. Walking forward slowly, the newcomer remarks on how confident the other sounded just moments ago. With an air of superiority, the old mage continues to mock him, telling him to look at Glowin's state now. Spotting him, Lee Kyul points him out, warning that he's the dark mage he encountered, while Rookie confirms he's finally shown his face, stammering. The disciple calls him master, but the old man just regrets thinking he and Lupus would be enough for the mission. On his knees, Glowin begs his master for forgiveness, who then asks where Lupus is, only to hear that he's likely dead. The disciple then screams that it was all that bastard mage's fault. Arrogantly, the old mage asks who he is, and why a mere mage is trying to get in the way of a dimensional mediator. Confused by the title, Lee Kuel is informed by Rookie that this is what dark mages call themselves. Unfazed, the young man fires back, asking why a dimensional mediator would get in the way of a simple mage. The old man just sighs, telling himself he was a fool for asking. Slamming his staff onto the ground, he begins chanting an arcane spell. With magic circles forming all around him, the old mage unleashes a powerful energy blast. A massive beam of energy shoots directly toward the group. The sheer scale of the attack leaves the young man completely speechlessly shocked. With no time to lose, Lee Kuel raises a force wall to defend himself. The energy slams violently into the magical barrier with devastating force. The young man pushes himself to the limit to hold off the blow, which drives him backward. The pressure is so intense that his feet sink into the ground, shattering the earth beneath him. With a cry of pain, Lee Kuel fights to keep the barrier up against the overwhelming force. However, the defense shatters, and the attack explodes with full force, wiping out part of the village. Lucy and Jenny watch the scene in sheer horror, stunned by the power of the blast. Desperate, the half-elf screams LK's name, terrified that he didn't survive. From a distance, Makin and the other mercenary witness the destruction as well. Unable to process what just happened, the warrior is left completely speechless. Through the clearing smoke, the old mage walks calmly. Unscathed by his own attack, he turns with a cold, indifferent glare, surveying the destruction he caused. With a chilling gaze, the dark mage turns his attention back to his opponents. With a simple gesture, he casts a magic missile spell. The energy projectiles shoot out, striking the warrior dead on as he tries to defend himself. The man screams in pain as he's thrown backward by the spell's impact. On the other side of the battlefield, Lee Kuel recovers and casts a fire horn. To counter, the old mage readies a spell circle and casts a cone of cold. The two opposing forces of fire and ice collide violently, sparking a massive explosion that blasts the young man away. Despite the struggle, the power of the ice cone overpowers the fire horn, swallowing Lee Kuel's attack whole. Exhausted, the young man mutters over his defeat, realizing the enemy possesses far more mana than he does. With an analytical look, the old mage questions where the youngster could have learned such a unique magic formula. Brushing it off, Lee Kuel replies that it doesn't matter if it was at the Sage Tower or the Inner Circle, asking why he even cares. Hearing the tower mentioned, Rookie yells out in disbelief at what he just heard. The white-bearded mage then claims that the fools at the Sage Tower merely cling to outdated tradition, but the kid pushes back, asking how he can be so sure. With a smug air, the man reveals that he himself came from that inner circle. The revelation leaves Rookie stunned, shouting that it's impossible, while Lee Kuel just tells him to shut his mouth. The young man then asks why someone like him turned into a dark mage, and the old man admits he simply couldn't break through his own wall. He goes on to explain that he absorbed every magic formula in existence, yet he still couldn't surpass his own limits. Clenching his fist, the mage laments that his 10 years of training were a complete waste. He bitterly recalls how, during that time, weaklings who barely put in any effort began passing him by. With a dark glare, the man asks if there isn't something deeply wrong with that. The young man listens in silence, understanding that without talent, learning magic is impossible, and effort doesn't always guarantee success. He realizes that some will never be able to grow, while others advance with the absolute bare minimum effort. Because of this, Lee Kuel understands that the mage grew disillusioned with the world's injustice and abandoned the Sage Tower. The young man then states that's just how the world is, and hard work isn't always rewarded. He recalls how, for instance, he studied relentlessly his entire life, only to be summoned to this world against his will. Enraged, the old mage screams that he was stuck for over 10 years behind a mediocre wall, asking if he was just supposed to give up. With glowing eyes, he declares that he's already wasted enough precious time, and that it's time to put an end to this. Exhausted, the young man realizes he won't be able to talk him out of this with simple words. Frustrated, he wonders what the guy even wants from him, considering he's just a regular student who wants to go home. Faced with the standoff, the two mages silently lock eyes for a moment. With a resolute look, the young man knows he has to find a way to turn the tables in his favor. With no time to think, the two mages glare at each other, gearing up for the next clash. With a grim look and eyes glowing with power, the old mage prepares his attack. Worried, the young man realizes the immense gap in power between them. He concludes his mana will run out way before his opponents if the fight keeps going like this. To buy time, the youth casts a force field and frantically searches for a way out of this mess. In response, the dark archmage fires his arcana blaster once again. The powerful blast slams into the barrier, pushing the boy's defense to its absolute limit. Under the sheer force of the impact, the ground beneath his feet starts to crack and give way. Straining with all his might, he knows he can't hold out much longer. Just then, Lucy places her hands on his back to lend him support. Shouting words of encouragement, the half-elf tells LK not to give up. Right after, the whole group joins him, declaring they'll win this battle together. To reinforce the defense, Rookie conjures his own force field. The two barriers merge, creating an even tougher magical shield. In the distance, the other mercenaries get ready to jump in, shouting that they won't let him fight alone. Moved by his companion's support, Lee Kuehl expresses his gratitude. He realizes that if everyone attacks together, they can create an opening in the enemy's defense. The boy then instructs the group to strike all at once as soon as the enemy's spell fades, knowing it's their only chance. The group readies themselves as the blast's energy begins to dissipate. The moment the magic fades, the youth yells for everyone to charge. Hearing the command, the warriors rush toward their target together. The old mage sneers at them, saying it would be easier to just die, mockingly asking if this is their final struggle. Undeterred, Lucy leads the charge, rushing straight at the enemy. The man claims that won't work on him and fires a bolt of lightning at her. The bolt strikes the half-elf's sword dead on, catching her off guard. The electric shock surges through the blade and hits her, making her scream in pain. Seizing the opening, the dark mage summons magic circles to form a fire spear. He then hurls the spell, which explodes upon hitting the other two advancing warriors. With a dismissive gesture, the dark archmage orders them to disappear. Suddenly, something grazes his face, catching him completely off guard. The attack came from Jenny, who was already prepping another arrow. Enraged, the old mage grumbles about how mere small fry dared to challenge him. To protect the archer, Rookie conjures a magic shield while she draws her arrows. The mercenary then unleashes a volley of ice arrows at the enemy. The dark mage, however, counters with his own fire arrows. The spells collide in midair and explode, canceling each other out. Taking advantage of the distraction, Lucy lunges forward from behind, shouting that she's got him. The man just sneers and tells the elf to know her place. Suddenly, a pool of grease appears right beneath her feet, sending her slipping. The half-elf cries out as she loses her footing and lands flat on her face. As she lies there, the mage approaches, gathering power in his hand. With a cold glare, he reaches out and commands her to die. Before he can strike, a wind blade comes slicing through, interrupting his spell. At that exact moment, Maken leaps in front of the girl, transforming into a were-tiger and roaring at the enemy. Without hesitation, Maken lunges in his beast form, slashing at the mage with his claws. Surprised by the transformation, the old man recognizes him as a beastkin. To defend himself, he quickly casts a barrier against the incoming attack. The dark mage then fires an air hammer that hits the were-tiger dead on. Even as he spits out a dark substance, Maken withstands the blow, his eyes blazing with fury. With a wave of his hand, the opponent blasts him away, taking him down with a single spell. Desperate, Rookie screams Maken's name as he sees him fall so easily. His face twisted in contempt, the archmage glares at them. He calls them foolish bastards and asks if they really thought such simple attacks would work on him. The man turns to Lee Kuehl and says he's relying on the strength of mere small fry, but the boy fires back that he doesn't want to hear that from someone who borrowed power from a demon. As the staff in his hands glows intensely, the youth thinks that thanks to everyone buying him time, he finally finished what he needed to do. With a sharp, determined look, he gets ready to cast his spell. He then unleashes a powerful gust of wind. A massive gale bursts forth, trapping the entire area in a giant whirlwind. The old mage, however, just sneers, mocking that after all that time, he only managed to cast a tier 3 spell. Arrogantly, the old mage declares that the end is near for the brash kid. With a confident smirk, Lee Kuel simply replies that he's disappointed. He explains that magic tiers aren't everything. The real key is analyzing the situation to use the most suitable spell. With utter conviction, the boy shouts that this is how true mages are supposed to fight. Suddenly, the youth leaps up and shoots a fire spell directly into his own whirlwind, shocking his opponent. Confused, the old mage wonders why he would throw the spell in there. The wind magic then begins to fuse with the flames, spawning an entirely new spell. Unbelieving, Rookie and Jenny wonder how such a thing is even possible. The boy explains that it's possible as long as you have the right formula and precise mana control. The old mage watches in horror, unable to believe his own eyes. The combined magic creates a colossal fiery tornado, which the archmage recognizes instantly. With an impressed look, the old mage admits the spell isn't bad at all. He then realizes the boy used the gust of wind to gather the fire and create a fiery tornado, a 6th tier spell. Smirking, the young man says his companion's attacks weren't in vain, adding he's surprised the mage only noticed the fire now. The master mage glares at him with pure hatred, utterly enraged. Then, Lee Kuel dares him to try another one of his tricks. The fire tornado charges forward at full force, swallowing everything in its path. Seeing this, Glone screams desperately for his master, fearing he'll get caught in the spell. Unshaken, the white-bearded man focuses and begins to cast a new spell. In an instant, he raises a massive wall of ice to protect himself. The frozen barrier forms just in time to block the advancing tornado. In the distance, Lucy yells at the boy, complaining that they were almost sucked into the whirlwind. He apologizes and asks if she's all right, but the half-elf replies that she can't move her legs anymore. The fire tornado slams violently into the ice wall, triggering a massive burst of steam. As the ice begins to melt and shatter, the old mage struggles to keep his defense up. His face twisted in fury, he releases all his energy to contain the attack. The explosion from the clashing magic throws Lee Kuel and Rookie backward. Desperate, Glone screams for his master, terrified he might not have survived the clash. Lee Kuel pushes him aside, shielding him from the smoke and debris. The ice wall finally shatters completely under the force of the impact. As the dust clears, the young mage asks if it's over, but the other replies it'd be nice if it were. Through the smoke, a figure begins to walk slowly. Soon, the old mage emerges unscathed, complaining that the kid caused him a lot of trouble. With a serious look, he praises the boy, saying he's actually pretty good. With a confident smirk, Lee Kuel replies that he hears that a lot, though he curses their situation in his head. The man then declares playtime is over and orders him to die. Desperate, the young man wonders if this is truly the end. The master mage starts casting arcana magic in his hand. Suddenly, however, something catches his attention in the distance. Surprised by what he sees, the man stops his spell halfway through. Watching closely, Lee Kuel also senses something approaching. With a confident smile, Lee Kuel prepares for his attack. He then declares he's going to show off his ultimate magic and summons a magic circle. Next, the boy launches a simple fireball, leaving Rookie shocked and accusing him of messing around. As the spell flies, the young man explains that it's not strong magic that wins. With a determined look, he shouts that whatever magic wins is the strong one, and charges at the enemy. Terrified, the other mage thinks there's no way a simple fireball could work against a 6th-tier dark mage. The old mage merely glares in disdain, mocking his magic. Suddenly, however, he begins coughing up a black substance, shocked by his body's reaction. His face pale with panic, he realizes something is terribly wrong with him. When he tries to cast a defensive spell, the man discovers he can no longer use magic. Unable to understand what's happening to his body, he falls into despair. The fireball hits him dead on, engulfing him in a massive burst of flames. The dark mage screams in agony as he's consumed by the fire. Desperate, Glowin shouts for his master and rushes to put out the flames. Seeing that the plan worked, Lee Kuel celebrates, while Rookie asks him how that was even possible. Glowin approaches his master's burned body and asks if he's okay. With great difficulty, the old mage calls out his disciple's name. His face disfigured by burns, he orders Glowin to run and carry him on his Without hesitation, the disciple hoists him onto his shoulders and takes off running. As he flees, the dark mage screams that they won't forget the humiliation of this day. Irritated, Lucy tries to chase them, yelling at them not to dare escape. However, Lee Kuel grabs her arm to stop her from running off. The half-elf tells him to let go, but the boy replies that it's too risky. He then explains that both his and Rookie's mana are completely drained, so it's best to let them go for now. Watching the enemies recede, the young mage asks why Marcus didn't use his defensive magic. With a smile, Lee Kuel corrects him, saying it wasn't because he didn't want to, but because he couldn't. Curious, Rookie asks why, and the boy explains it was due to carbon dioxide poisoning. He elaborates that the colorless, odorless, and tasteless gas is created by combustion. He continues, explaining that the fire tornado was created by combining magic and natural combustion, drawing in carbon dioxide. Finally, the young man concludes that while blocking with the ice wall was the right call, it wasn't enough to protect him from the gas. He continues his explanation, saying that if Marcus had realized it, he could have purified the air, but he lowered his guard after being distracted by the tornado. With a smile, he concludes that inhaling too much carbon dioxide cuts off the body's oxygen supply. This causes headaches and nausea, forcing even the strongest mage to lose focus due to a lack of oxygen in the brain. With an enlightened look, Lucy seems to finally grasp the complex explanation. However, the half-elf admits she has no idea what he's talking about, and Rookie instantly agrees, leaving the boy to sigh over this world's level of science. In the distance, the sun begins to rise behind the mountains, bringing the long night to an end. Amidst the ruins of the village, the group gathers and watches the sun rise. With an excited smile, the girl asks if they actually won in the end. After that, the half-elf and the young mage cheer their victory aloud, while Lee Kuel just watches, utterly exhausted. The boy thinks that although Marcus will suffer from the poisoning for a while, having an entire group of dark mages as enemies is terrifying. He then remembers the look in Marcus' eyes, which carried an absolute resolve. With a determined gaze, the young man promises himself that they'll cross paths again someday. However, with a faint smile, he thinks the most important thing is that they survive today's battle. Together, the mercenaries raise their arms and cheer loudly for winning the fight. Meanwhile, during their escape, Glowin realizes his master has passed out and calls him in worry. His face badly burned. The old mage vows he will kill every single one of them. He then remembers the brat mage's name, LK, and swears he'll kill him with his own hands. Next, the master orders Glowin to notify the other dimension mediators. From this day on, he declares that LK and his companions are to be considered enemies of all mediators. Scratching his head, LK remarks that he almost died this time and that even though it was a risky gamble, it paid off in the end. Leaning on his staff, the young mage admits he thought they were all going to die when the enemy appeared, and LK agrees that the world is full of powerful people. Next, the girl asks if all dark mages are that strong, leaving her companion sheepishly apologizing. With a confident smile, the woman assures them that she doesn't mind the danger as long as she gets her mercenary pay. Patting him on the back, she praises LK for being able to defeat such a powerful enemy. Humble, the young man claims it was just luck and that he isn't sure he could win again, but his companion counters, saying that luck is what matters most. Looking at him with gratitude, the archer openly thanks LK for saving everyone's life. Blushing deeply at the praise, the young man replies that victory was only possible thanks to the whole party's efforts. Watching her reaction, LK thinks to himself that he prefers that type of woman over a girl like Lucy. Suddenly, the party is interrupted by a voice calling out to them from a distance. Looking back, they see the warrior leader approaching, asking if everyone is all right. With a scowl, the girl questions if they look all right, making the man laugh as he realizes she still has the energy to complain. Seeing the wounded, the man asks for a lesion, and one of them replies that she's probably tending to injuries at the town hall. Right after, the mercenary puts her arm around LK's shoulders and asks if he wants to help her out. Hearing her ask if she can count on his help, LK replies yes, completely blushing from the closeness. Startled by his own body's reaction, LK feels his heart racing wildly, unsure why he's so flustered. Suddenly, Lucy pushes her way between the two companions and loudly declares that she will help instead. While LK claims he can handle it alone, Lucy tells the young mage to go grab his staff already. Pointing ahead, Lucy clarifies that she isn't talking about the boy's staff, but the one lying on the ground. In front of the group, the fallen enemy's weapon remains abandoned in the dirt. Looking at the object, Lee Kyul figures the dark mage fled in despair and ended up leaving the item behind. Picking up the weapon, Lee Kyul thinks about how that symbol requires tuning one's mana pattern to be used, recalling that Seafire's made his own. Then, Lee Kyul hands the object to the young mage as battle loot, receiving a surprise thank you in return. Surveying the destruction around them, the young man reflects that despite winning the battle, the village suffered far too much damage. Standing before the ruins, Lee Kyul simply contemplates the destruction in silence. Right after, the young man turns to rejoin his companions. As they approach the town hall, they call out for Elysian to let her know they're back. Standing in front of the closed door, the adventurers find the silence odd and wonder if the girl might have left. Opening the door while calling for Elysian, Lee Kyul is cut off by a terrifying scene. Inside, Elysian is held hostage, a dagger pressed right against her neck. Seeing the group enter, the captor immediately orders no one to take another step. Desperate and crying heavily, Marie cries out for her brother while being restrained by the villains. With a mocking smirk, the man claims he warned them they'd regret taking on the Dark Brotherhood. Unfazed by the threat, Lee Kyul asks disdainfully if they shouldn't have known by now that they'd lose this battle. The bandit scoffs at the young man's relaxed attitude and warns him that he could never defeat their master. Curious at the mention, Lee Kyul asks if he's referring to the dark mage who was just defeated. Irritated by the mock, the man tells them not to run and threatens to kill the woman the young man loves. At that declaration, Lee Kyul and his companions freeze completely, utterly confused. Not knowing how to react, the young man asks in shock what on earth the villain is talking about. Pointing at Elysian, Lee Kyul asks if she was the one who made that story up, causing the girl to desperately deny it. As the henchmen debate whether the young man prefers younger girls, Lucy screams in a rage against the criminal's insults. Trying to regain control, the leader of the intruders demands their surrender and warns that his allies are fighting outside. However, outside the town hall, complete silence reigns. Baffled by the lack of noise, the captor wonders in fear why it's so quiet out there. Taking advantage of the general distraction, Marie bites down hard on the hand holding her, making the man scream in pain. Clutching his throbbing hand, the villain rages furiously as Marie runs away from him. Seizing the opening, Elysian lands a precise elbow strike right to the captor's face. Feeling the impact, the man roars in pain, his nose bleeding. Without wasting a second, the girl grabs the attacker's arm tightly to pin him. With a swift motion, Elysian slams the criminal down, pinning him brutally to the floor. Seeing his companions move, Lee Kyul casts an immobilization spell to restrain the remaining intruders. Instantly, the bandits panic as they realize their bodies are completely paralyzed by the spell. Approaching gently, the young man wraps his arms around the crying Marie, reassuring her that everything is all right now. Meanwhile, Lucy goes completely furious, remembering the insult of being called a child. Outside, the man's desperate screams echo as he receives a severe punishment. Talking to Elysian, Lee Kyul remarks on her strength, while she explains she only held back because of the hostage, then asks about the battle. Breaking into a wide smile, the young man proudly replies that they emerged victorious from the clash. Overcome with excitement, Elysian and the little girl enthusiastically hug Lee Kyul to celebrate the victory. Embarrassed by the gesture, the young woman flusteredly apologizes, but the young man kindly replies that it's no problem at all. Overwhelmed with emotion, Marie thanks Lee Kyul for defeating the criminals who took her parents' lives. Gently, the young man pats the little girl's head to comfort her as she continues to cry. Smiling warmly, Lee Kyul affectionately asks if he didn't keep the promise he made her. At that, the young man recalls the moment he swore he would avenge Marie's parents. Back then, the two had locked pinkies to seal their pledge. Relieved, Marie joyfully agrees that he truly kept his word. Consumed by rage, the girl asks the man how he likes a young elf's kick as she relentlessly pummels him. Witnessing such brutal violence, Lee Kyul gets startled and asks if she still has the energy to keep beating her attacker. Terrified by his companion's fury, the young man silently concludes he needs to watch his mouth around Lucy if he wants to stay alive. Changing the subject, Lee Kuel informs Elysian that other warriors are injured, and the girl promptly asks to bring them inside. Next, the priestess closes her eyes and begins casting her healing magic. Focusing her divine energy, Elysian channels the restoration spell onto the severely injured man's body. Watching the treatment, Lee Kuel asks how the warrior feels, to which the wounded man replies he's fine despite his broken ribs. Right after, the young woman extends her hands to treat the wound on another companion's shoulder. Scolding his recklessness, Elysian reminds him she warned him not to overdo it, and he apologizes, explaining he acted without thinking when he saw the dark mage. Smiling with relief after finishing the spell, the girl adds that it's great to see him alive. Truly grateful for the help, the warrior responds with a simple thank you. Turning to the people in the room, Elysian announces she'll treat the most critical cases first, and asks anyone who can to lend a hand. Then, the priestess asks the female residents for hot water and clean towels, and they immediately agree to help. Outside the building, a large crowd of injured people gathers, desperately seeking medical attention. Walking alongside Lee Kuel, the other young man laments the destruction left in the village and vows to make the culprit pay for everything with his own hands. Unsure about their next steps, the young mage asks what they should do now, and Lee Kuel hesitates, asking not to be questioned. Explaining the situation, the young man considers that the dark mages came for the mana stone mine, and that the bandits should still be there, leading the warrior to suggest heading over. Assessing the enemy's condition, Lee Kuel states the villain lost his staff and took heavy damage, so he'd hardly return to the mine. When asked about the presence of other dark mages, the warrior reveals that the interrogated bandits confirmed there were only 3 of them. Facing this confirmation, Lee Kuel simply watches in silence as he processes the information. Meanwhile, a line of injured, bound prisoners is led away under guard. Taking a deep sigh, the young man concludes they have no choice but to push forward. Determined, Lee Kuel gathers his companions and firmly declares they must act fast and head into battle. On their way to the destination, the girl presses the tip of her sword against the bound bandit's back to keep him moving. Threatening the prisoner, Lucy demands he not try to trick them, while the man desperately begs her to stop poking him. Right after, Lee Kuel and his companions march single file up the trail toward the mountains. Exhausted from the trek, the guy complains about fatigue and lack of sleep as he faces the steep climb. In silence, Lee Kuel sorrowfully reflects on having taken lives, even knowing he did everything to save Marie. The young man recalls the tense moment he used a blast of air to protect Marie during the confrontation. Back then, the spell's powerful impact through the enemies far away amid screams of despair. In utter desperation, Lee Kuel vents, shouting where he is, who he is, and screaming that he just wants to go home. Panicking, the guy thinks in horror that he was just a regular student who turned into a mage, took lives, and whose mother would go crazy if she found out. Concerned about the march, Lee Kuel asks the warrior if he's really okay to tag along and suggests he rest a bit more. Laughing at the gesture, the man tells the kid not to worry, noting he's sweating way more than everyone else. Approaching teasingly, Jenny asks the guy if he wants a piggyback ride since he's so tired, catching him off guard. Seeing the young man's shock, the archer assures him she's doing this for Lee Kuel, reminding him that mages aren't known for physical strength. Right behind them, the young mage comments to the elf that his friends seem to be going through a much harder time. Walking next to the girl, the boy asks if she's tired and praises her skill, receiving only brief answers in return. Next, Lucy announces she's going ahead and dashes up the trail, leaving the guy utterly bewildered. Seeing the girl's reaction, the young mage gets completely discouraged while Lee Kuel and Jenny watch the scene, bursting into laughter. Shortly after, the prisoner stops mid-path and notifies the group that they've finally reached their destination. Observing the dense foliage, Lee Kuel notes the trees block their view and says he'll use a spell to scout the area. Activating his vision magic, the guy confirms they're in the right spot after spotting several armed bandits near the mine. Seizing the moment, the prisoner bolts off, screaming for help and alerting his allies about the villagers' attack. Stunned by the criminal's move, Lee Kuel yells in annoyance, unable to believe the guy could sprint so fast after faking a limp the entire way. Not catching the reference, Jenny asks what he means while the young mage tries to make sense of the situation. Mockingly laughing, the man shows off in front of his allies, boasting he'd never obey them now that he's at their main base. Watching the criminal's audacity, Lee Kuel remarks the guy hasn't been beaten enough, and Lucy agrees she should have pummeled him even more. Pointing in terror, one of the bandits warns his crew that the kid in front of them is the one who defeated a dark mage with a single strike. Annoyed by the gesture, Lee Kuel demands they stop pointing at him and asks if they want to share the dark mage's fate. With a smug smirk, the ex-prisoner scoffs at the warning, claiming that kind of threat won't work on them. However, overcome by panic, the rest of the criminals immediately drop their weapons to the ground. Desperate, the man tries to rally his allies to fight together, but the bandits snap back that it's impossible to face someone who took down a dark mage so easily. While Lee Kuel reflects on how exaggerated rumors made his reputation, Lucy roars, demanding the runner get over to her. Facing the girl's rage, the criminal begins trembling in fear, with nowhere left to run. Overwhelming, the young woman raises her fist to deliver a harsh punishment to the rebel once and for all. Moments later, the man's screams for help echo through the woods as he receives a merciless beating. Sprawled on the ground and covered in bruises, the villain pathetically groans before his completely surrendered crew. Watching the chaos settle, the hostage workers kept at the mine begin gathering, shocked by what just took place. Seeing everyone's anxiety, the warrior leader speaks up in a firm tone, telling them to stay calm. With a booming voice, the warrior shouts to the crowd that they came to rescue everyone. Caught off guard by the villagers' distant reaction, the man stutters, asking himself why everyone is acting like that. Observing the situation, the other warrior comments that even the mountain dwellers were being exploited as slaves by the bandits. Determined to investigate, the young man says he'll check the mine's interior and asks Lucy to watch the prisoners, to which the girl agrees, promising to stop anyone who tries to escape. Next, Lee Kuel and his companions walk together into the pitch-black cave. As they venture deeper, the adventurers walk down a tunnel filled with glowing crystals embedded in the walls. Awestruck by the discovery, the warrior comments, "It's unbelievable that no one ever found a manastone mine of this size before." Upon finding chests packed with treasure, Jenny points to the piled gold, noting the criminals must have been making a fortune. Examining the jewels, the guy figures the bandits were trying to flee with the cash and questions the massive amount of manastones they traded. Shortly after, the young mage calls the group's attention to look at something discovered on the cave wall. Showing the mineral he found, the boy reveals it's a raw manastone crystal. Holding the gleaming fragment, Lee Kuel stands in utter shock, confirming the sheer rarity of that stone. Assessing the surroundings, the warrior compares the place's density to the kingdom's largest mine, while the young mage calculates the massive amount extracted over time. Hearing the estimate that the resource could yield over 1 million gold coins, everyone present screams in absolute shock. While Jenny explains it'd be impossible to buy that much manastone all at once, Lee Kuel starts mentally calculating the compensation fees he has to pay. In total shock, Lee Kuel shouts in awe as he realizes the extracted volume exceeds normal levels by 30,000 times. Touching the cave wall, the young mage explains that mining manastones isn't complex like gold, but it requires so much labor that it explains the slavery here. Crossing her arms, Jenny ponders that a massive amount of ore was illegally trafficked without anyone knowing its final destination. Visibly infuriated, the warrior warns that this situation threatens not just the kingdom of Kudrin, but all neighboring nations as well. Paralyzed by all these revelations, Lee Kuel starts questioning the severity of the mess he just stumbled into. Holding the crystal with trembling hands, the young man falls into despair, realizing he's gotten mixed up in a completely insane conspiracy. Given the gravity of the situation, the warrior remarks that finding the mine is far more serious than they thought. Then, the leader suggests taking everyone back to the village to report everything that happened to the local lord. Turning to his companion, the man asks if he could handle the report, catching the other guy off guard. In a respectful tone, the warrior praises his companion's skills and highlights how disciplined he is. Puzzled by this, the young man asks if he's assuming he's nobility based on such simple observations. In response, the man points out that risking his life to save his allies proves they were his loyal vassals. Hearing those words, the young man recalls the moment he swore to avenge his fallen comrade. He also remembers charging into battle with fury, willing to lay down his life for them. Back in the present, the young man simply keeps his memories to himself in silence. Watching the scene, Lee Kyul understands that the warrior had his own reasons for acting that way. Firmly, the leader reinforces that his companion is the ideal person to deliver the report discreetly. Faced with that argument, the young man just gives a slight smile in agreement. Accepting the task, the warrior admits he can't fool a veteran's sharp eye and takes on the mission. Upon learning that reporting the discovery would yield a huge reward, Lee Kyul excitedly asks how to get the money. Told he'd have to wait months in the capital for the emperor, the young man asks if the payment couldn't just be made via bank transfer. Completely confused by the question, the man just wonders to himself, having no idea what a bank account is. Seeing his confusion, the leader suggests that the warrior keep the entire reward to help the villagers get through the winter. With his fist over his chest, the young man swears on his honor as a knight that he will use all the money to benefit the local people. Excited about the deal, the leader says they'll wrap everything up once they get back to the village, while Lee Kyul groans about having to walk all the way back again. Approaching provocatively, Jenny offers to carry him on her back, but the young man declines, insisting he's doing just fine. With that, the sun begins to set over the mountains as the group makes their way back to their destination. Upon their arrival, the man profusely thanks the adventurers, passing along the gratitude of all the local residents. Worried, Lee Kyul muses that another dark mage might show up because of the mine, but his companion assures him he'll report the danger to the capital. Inviting them to rest, the warrior lets them know he's prepared a meal and encourages the young man to join Elysian. Shortly after, the group walks toward the house where dinner is served while the locals go about their day in the village. On the table, a wide variety of mouth-watering, well-prepared dishes awaits the guests. Without wasting any time, Lucy digs in, devouring a giant piece of meat with a massive appetite. Watching the dinner unfold, Lee Kyul asks the young mage how he managed to analyze the mine and the mana stone so quickly. Nonchalantly, the boy replies that it was obvious just by looking at the mineral, leaving the young man completely speechless. Next, the young mage asks how Lee Kyul managed to reach the 5th circle of magic, making the young man question why he's asking. The young mage explains that he's been stuck at the 4th circle for years without progressing, and admits he doesn't know how to overcome this wall, adding that he used to think magic was simple. The boy asks Lee Kyul if there's any secret to breaking through this barrier and leveling up. In a firm tone, Lee Kyul exclaims that magic requires effort and dedication, criticizing his companion for trying to take the easy way out. With a smirk on his face, the young man asserts that he'll keep choosing the easy way out for himself, though. At that, the young mage concludes that Lee Kyul has indeed mastered this obstacle, and asks if he can call him master from now on. Striking a proud pose, he replies that he'll allow the title just this once, and the boy mentions he'd like to ask one more question. Whispering on the side, the boy asks what his real relationship with Lucy is. The scene flashes back to when the young mage tried to strike up a conversation with Lucy, only receiving short, blunt answers from her. Hearing the question, Lee Kyul merely cracks a smile. In a teasing tone, the young man boldly claims that the two of them are engaged. At that declaration, the young mage freezes in shock, imagining the two of them getting married. Bursting into laughter, Lee Kyul clarifies that it was just a joke, knowing exactly what was running through his companion's head. Seeing that the village has settled down, Jenny asks where the group plans to head next, to which Lee Kyul reveals his path leads toward the Grand Temple. Then, the young mage mentions he'll return to the tower to report what happened, and Jenny explains her job is to escort him there, understanding the situation. Lee Kyul simply replies that he gets it, remarking that it would have been nice to have more company on the road. Determined, the young mage declares he'll train with all his might to reach the 5th circle of magic. In his thoughts, Lee Kyul reflects that the world is vast and filled with people far stronger than him. He considers the possibility of facing other dark mages or even crossing paths with Marcus again. Given these dangers, Lee Kyul concludes he needs to get stronger and stronger to travel safely. With an absolved look in his eyes, the young man reiterates his goal to find the Dragonheart fragment as soon as possible. The next day, the local resident tearfully thanks them for everything they've done for the village. Shaking his friend's hand in farewell, the knight reminds him that he has saved his life multiple times in the past. Beside them, Elysian instructs the warrior to change his bandages regularly to ensure a full recovery. Surprising the priestess, the man respectfully drops to one knee before her. Then, the knight gently takes the girl's hand, kneeling. The man kisses her hand and prays that her path be blessed by the light. Flustered and blushing, Elysian thanks him for the gesture and wishes the knight a blessed journey. Right after, Lee-Kyul, Elysian, and Lucy wave goodbye together as the warrior rides off on his horse. Walking alongside his companion, Lee-Kyul teases her, commenting that it must have been wonderful to get a hand kiss from someone so handsome. Seeing the priestess turn her head away with a pout, the young man gets startled, not understanding why she got mad over a simple joke. Quoting, Elysian tells Lee-Kyul to drop the subject and completely ignores his question. Mounted on the horse alongside Jenny, the young mage warmly thanks everyone as he says goodbye. As the boy bids farewell to Lucy, hoping they'll meet again, Lee-Kyul admits he's jealous seeing him hold onto the archer's waist. In a laid-back manner, Lucy simply waves back and tells the kid to train hard. Beaming with joy, the boy exclaims emotionally when he realizes she actually waved at him. Quoting, Jenny teases Lee-Kyul, calling him a brat and saying she hopes to see him again soon. With his face flushing bright red in surprise, Lee-Kyul shouts in excitement after noticing the archer winked at him. After that, the companions wave together as the pair rides off down the road on their horse. Moments later, Lee-Kyul turns around in surprise as he hears Marie calling out his name. In tears, Marie asks if he really has to leave, terrified that he might never come back. While Lee-Kyul pats the little girl's head and promises to return, Lucy warns him that he shouldn't make promises he can't keep. Annoyed by the comment, Lee-Kyul asks why the elf is being so hard on a little child. Smiling warmly, the young man asks Marie to behave and stay healthy until they meet again. Approaching the group, the warrior assures them he'll take good care of the girl and mentions it's time for them to head out. As the carriage begins to move, everyone exchanges final goodbyes, wishing them a safe and blessed trip. After leaving the carriage with a firm grip, the man urges the horses to move forward down the road. Snorting loudly, the animals pick up the pace, pulling the vehicle along the path. With their rapid speed, the wooden wheels rattle noisily against the ground. Outside, Marie waves cheerfully while thanking Lee-Kyul and saying goodbye. Leaning out the vehicle's window, Lee-Kyul waves back and wishes the little girl well. Watching the carriage fade into the horizon, the girl keeps waving goodbye. Shortly after, the vehicle continues its journey, entering a path surrounded by trees. Inside, Lee-Kyul rests his face on his hand, sitting in thoughtful silence. Looking out at the scenery, the young man considers how much quieter it feels without the other three companions around. With a smile on his face, the young man thinks about how much he'd love to run into Jenny again. Turning to the side, Lee-Kyul asks Elysian if something is bothering her. With a serious expression, the priestess voices her concern about the dark mages, explaining that they've formed a cult to protect themselves. Then, Elysian asks Lee-Kyul how much he knows about the Holy Castle War. Caught completely off guard, Lee-Kyul asks what that war is even about, while Lucy sleeps peacefully right beside him. Faced with her question, the young man just looks at his snoring companion, oblivious to the gravity of the conversation. Continuing her explanation, Elysian describes how many mages sought dark power and grew their influence until a king eventually asked for their help. Next, the priestess reveals that King Nicholas the Fur offered all his resources to the villains, giving birth to the mighty plant empire. Listening to the tale, Lee-Kyul remarks that both sides seemed ready to betray each other at any moment. Agreeing with him, Elysian explains that the emperor began hunting down the dark mages as soon as he grew fearful of their rising influence. Continuing the story, the girl reveals that the leader of the villains foresaw the impending betrayal and decided to risk everything on one final gamble. Right after that, Elysian describes how the group set up a massive magic circle around the royal castle. The priestess adds that the spell was cast by sacrificing the lives of thousands of civilians and consuming a massive amount of mana. With that, the summoners began chanting forbidden incantations to initiate the ritual. Joining forces, the dark mages intensified their prayers, pouring even more power into the area. Immediately, the people in the region began to suffer terribly from the curse's effects. Faced with such cruelty, the population writhed in agony as the magic drained their very life force. Suddenly, a violent shockwave erupted, destroying everything in its path. Resuming her narrative, Elysian explains that the magic consumption was so extreme, it completely drained the casters' own lives. She highlights that many of the villains were reduced entirely to ashes during the process. As the spell ended, the last summoner's body disintegrated completely into thin air, leaving no trace behind. Elysian then explains that this tragedy culminated in the creation of a dimensional gate connected directly to the demon realm. With the opening of the hellish portal, endless demonic creatures swarmed into the region. With a solemn look, the priestess concludes that this event marked the beginning of the Sacred Castle War. Hearing this, Lee Kuel looks at his companion, stunned by the gravity of the story. In silence, the young man reflects that the entire situation was far more serious and complex than he had imagined. As Lucy continues sleeping beside him, Lee Kuel ponders how terrifyingly powerful the enemy leader must have been to open such a portal. Adjusting himself in his seat, the young man asks if, in the end, it was a war fought strictly between humans and demons. Turning around energetically, Elysian explains that the situation was much more complex, making an alliance of several races' years to end the conflict. With a beaming face, the priestess adds that amidst all the chaos, 5 legendary heroes emerge. Curious at the mention, Lee Kuel asks in surprise who these 5 heroes were. In response, the girl names Lionel, the great Archmage of Light, and Trinity, the master elemental archer. Continuing the list, Elysian mentions Tony, the mercenary king of the beast folk, and Emily, the high priestess. Finally, she highlights the star, the fearless knight of light, as the last member of the group. She then describes how the heroes fought fiercely against the forces of darkness, nearly destroying the castle in the process. Concluding her story, Elysian relates how the knight pierced the villain's heart with his sword, ending the war and turning the deed into a timeless legend. Commenting that it's fascinating to learn about the continent's history, Lee Kuel asks what happened to the 5 heroes afterward. At his question, Elysian suddenly flinches, her face turning bright red. Meanwhile, Lucy remains fast asleep, completely unaware of her companion's reaction. Settling further into her sleep, the girl simply adjusts herself comfortably beside the young man. Finding the priestess's behavior strange, Lee Kuel calls out to Elysian upon noticing her frozen and unresponsive. Trying to compose herself, the young woman explains that the heroes gained massive influence, and Sistar took the kingdom's throne with popular support. Hearing that the mage, Lionel, founded the Tower of Sages starting from Cereses, Lee Kuel interrupts to ask about that order. In reply, Elysian clarifies that the order was created by Lionel's master and brought together many mages over time. Thinking back to Cereses, the young man remembers the dragon he met when he first arrived in this world, and realizes he was the master she mentioned. With that, Lee Kuel quietly ponders that a fragment of the dragon's heart also lies within that same kingdom. He recalls when Ryard mentioned serving as a knight there, and receiving the title of Mark. He also remembers that the warrior embedded the magic stone into the blade Black Chain years before the Great War. Given this revelation, Lee Kuel asks Elysian if she knows which weapon the knight used to defeat the enemy. Thoughtfully, the priestess replies that the hero fought using the blade inherited from his mother, named Black Chain. Shocked by the confirmation, Lee Kuel wonders if the knight's mother was part of the Marquis's family. Continuing the conversation, Elysian explains that many mysteries surround the knight's origins, which sparked strong opposition to his rule. Hearing that, Lee Kuel considers whether the legendary warrior might actually be a descendant of Ryard. Suddenly waking from her sleep, Lucy claims she heard her mother's name, leaving the young man startled by her comment. Yawning loudly, Lucy reveals that the famous elemental archer from the legend is actually her mother. In total shock, Lee Kuel shouts in disbelief, while Elysian notices the stark difference in the girl's fighting style. When the girl replies that her mother didn't think she had a talent for archery, Lee Kuel secretly suspects her habit of punching first is the real reason. Impressed to be traveling with the heroine's descendant, Elysian mentions the archer's disappearance, while the young man wonders about her father's secret. Returning to a serious tone, Elysian expresses concern over the return of the dark mages and their past atrocities. As the priestess warns how the enemy group operates from the shadows, Lee Kuel reflects that he wants no further involvement with these villains. Amidst the memories of the war, the recollection of how the powerful summoned demon wrought destruction across the realm stands out. The story warns of an even greater disaster should the summoners manage to bring the demon king himself into this world. Curious about the tale, Lee Kyul asks why they didn't summon the demon lord back then, and Elysian answers that they lacked the capacity to do so. Upon hearing her explanation, Lee Kyul recalls the guidance he received from the legendary Ryard during his past training. Back then, Ryard had explained that dimensional portals collapse if they attempt to transport a quantity of mana that exceeds their limit. Returning to the conversation in the carriage, Elysian adds that this historical limitation gave rise to popular songs among the villains themselves. Next, Elysian explains that subtle omens usually appear before a major catastrophe strikes. Following this, Lee Kyul asks if she believes that event is tied to the future summoning of the Demon King. Lowering her eyes, the priestess admits she isn't sure, but warns of the danger of the Hell Gate being reopened. At that grim possibility, a terrifying vision of agonizing souls emerges from the darkness. Deeply uneasy at the thought, the young man swallows hard, imagining the danger. Trying to reassure himself, Lee Kyul gestures dismissively, stating that opening such a portal would take too much effort and that summoning the Demon King is impossible. Grit his teeth, the young man declares he just needs to get back home before anything like that happens. With that, Lee Kyul desperately prays to return to his own world as the carriage continues to rattle down the road. Moving forward with steady steps, the horse continues marching down the dirt road. Complaining about fatigue and back pain from riding, Lee Kyul hears from the warrior that he's actually doing quite well for a first try. Without understanding her companion's struggle, Lucy performs an acrobatic trick on the animal with extreme ease. Teasing Lee Kyul about his lack of skill, the elf enjoys herself while the young man annoyance asks her to stop playing around. Satisfied with the riding practice, the man lets them know it's time to head to their destination. Curious about the route, Lee Kyul asks where they are heading now. With great enthusiasm, Elysian explains that their destination is La Rochelle, the largest commercial city in the Kingdom of Kudrin. As he sees the place approaching, the young man expresses his awe at the view. Faced with the grand vision of the commercial city of La Rochelle, the group gazes at the massive number of buildings and walls. Observing the bustling streets, the priestess comments on the strong presence of mercenaries alongside the merchants. Following the line of carriages, Elysian adds that the need to protect valuable resources made this place the headquarters of the region's largest guild. Guiding the youngsters through the market stalls, the warrior says he will take them to his old friend's inn. Shortly after, they arrive at the location and enter the cozy establishment. Upon entering, the warrior warmly greets the owner, Sherman, and asks how he has been doing. As Elysian kindly inquires about the inn's business, Sherman admits he lives modestly and asks about the new companions brought along by the group. The owner then mentions he will prepare the rooms and baths so they can rest, and Elysian immediately thanks him. While the accommodations are prepared, the inn remains quiet, warmed by the cozy fireplace. After taking a hot bath, Lee Kyul remarks with relief how long it has been since he enjoyed a moment like this. Walking into the main hall, the young man is waved over by the warrior to join the others at the dining table. Approaching the group, Lee Kyul notices everyone has already gathered and hears from the warrior that they were discussing plans for the next day. The man explains they can reach the Great Temple by nightfall if they leave early, but asks if the item they're looking for is far away. Taking for a moment to check the information, the young man pulls out his tracking device. Suddenly, Lee Kyul's eyes widen as he notices something on the tool's display. Looking at the glowing map, the young man realizes with amazement that his objective is extremely close by. Curious about what he sees, Lee Kyul asks his companions what exactly lies north of the city. Pointing to the area, the warrior explains that in that direction lie the fairy forest, the mirror lake, and the fairy palace. Excited by the news, the young man enthusiastically asks if they will be able to see a fairy if they head there. Bringing him back to reality, Elysian clarifies that things aren't that simple and that no one enters the forest easily. The priestess adds that the region lies on the border of the spiritual realm, which distorts paths and prevents the use of navigation. Agreeing with the warning, the warrior emphasizes that the place is known as the fairy barrier and most people who enter never return. Desperate over his bad luck, Lee Kyul shouts, unable to understand why the item had to be in that specific place. Telling him to stop complaining, Lucy announces she will go with him too, prompting Elysian to ask if the elf was listening about the danger of never coming back. The warrior then advises Lee Kale to give up due to the risks, but the young man insists he cannot let this go. With complete determination in his eyes, Lee Kale yells that he has a very important reason to get that object. Trying to calm things down, the young man proposes that only he and Lucy enter the forest while the other two head to the great temple. Reacting immediately, Elysian leaps to her feet and indignantly demands to know what he is talking about. Feeling a bit embarrassed, Lee Kale explains he can't drag his companions into such a dangerous place over a personal matter. Faced with his argument, the girl simply pouts her cheeks, visibly upset. Surprising everyone at the table, the priestess abruptly snatches the mug of drink from the warrior's hands. Without hesitation, Elysian gulps down the entire drink in one go, leaving the group stunned. Completely speechless at her action, Lee Kale stammers, unable to believe what he just witnessed. Wiping her mouth with her arm, the girl lets out a loud sigh after swallowing the drink. Tipsy from the alcohol, Elysian fumes, asking how Lee Kale could say something like that to his friends, while the confused young man asks what he did wrong. With flushed cheeks, the priestess loudly declares that she is coming along with him no matter what. Trying to smooth things over, Lee Kale reminds her that the place is dangerous, but the girl snaps back that she won't let them go alone so recklessly. Stating that she considers him a true companion, Elysian declares she would never let him go to such a dangerous place by himself. Hearing her words, the warrior agrees that what she said makes perfect sense. The man then reinforces that everyone there received a lot of help from the duo, so they couldn't just turn their backs now. Hearing this, Lucy asks if they are all going on the journey together then. Looking at the gathered group, the warrior confirms it seems they will all be taking the same path. Awkwardly, Lee Kale admits things got out of control, but deep down he recognizes he wanted their company. Observing the situation, the man points out that having Elysian and an experienced mercenary by their side will be a huge help. With that, the warrior suggests taking a day to prepare and look for someone who returned alive from the place to gather information. Interrupting the conversation, the owner smiles and mentions he has the perfect person to recommend. Upon hearing the offer, everyone at the table turns attentively to find out who this person could be. The man then asks if they knew his wife used to be part of the Thieves' Guild. Astonished, Lee Kale asks how they could possibly know that, while the owner reveals she used to be known as Kitty in the past. Suddenly, the tavern keeper reveals his wife knows someone who has been to the forest, startling the young man as he notices the woman right behind him. Intimidated by her presence, Lee Kale panics, wondering if her nickname shouldn't be Giant Bear instead of Kitty. Trying to focus on the matter at hand, the young man asks where they could find this person. Since she hasn't heard any rumors about the person leaving the city, the woman says they will find clues at the guild and offers to guide them to the secret location. Surprised by the rush, Lee Kale asks if it isn't too late to head out, but their guide replies there is no problem at all. With a knowing wink, the ex-thief smiles and explains that the Thieves' Guild's business only really starts after sunset. And so, under the moonlight, the night in the commercial city proves to be just as busy and full of life as the day itself. Walking together through a narrow alley, the group carefully follows the woman's steps through the dimly lit streets. Shortly after, the guide stops in front of an establishment bearing the sign of the Treasure Hunters Guild and announces they have reached their destination. Confused as he looks at the storefront, Lee Kale asks in surprise if they weren't supposed to be looking for the Thieves' Guild. Hearing the door open, the old man at the front desk finds the adventurers' arrival strange and asks what brings them to that place. Recognizing the woman, the old man greets her by her old nickname and hears from her that they are there for a meeting with the master. Without wasting any time, the ex-thief approaches a bookshelf filled with old books to activate a hidden mechanism. Gently pulling one of the volumes from the shelf, she triggers the device for the secret passage. Immediately, the heavy wooden structure unlocks and begins to move noisily. Sliding smoothly to the side, the bookshelf opens up to a dark, mysterious entrance. Pointing to the revealed hallway, the guide warns that only 2 people can accompany her and tells them to leave their weapons with the receptionist. Faced with the restriction, Lee Kale decides to go ahead with Lucy while asking Elysian and the warrior to wait there, reassuring them that everything will be fine. Heading down the stone stairs, the guide cautions Lee Kale and Lucy to watch their steps. Curious about the path, The young man asks if the person who returned alive from the fairy forest also has a nickname in the guild. During his question, the woman explains that codenames are based on each person's physical traits, while Lee Kale responds with hesitation. Continuing the conversation, the guide adds that this particular individual happens to be even more peculiar among the organization's members. Right after, the figure of a cat girl held in chains on the floor of a cell is revealed. Raising her gaze toward the group, the young prisoner's codename, Civet, is finally revealed. Lit by small wall candles, a long stone corridor stretches deep underground. Impressed by the path, Lee Kale asks if they really should have access to this secret passage, but the guide replies that many people know about it. She then explains that the headquarters has multiple exits connected to the sewers, but only one main entrance. Looking around alongside Lucy, the young man notes how the guild was designed to make any escape attempt nearly impossible. Right after, the group stops before a heavy wooden door at the end of the path. Opening the way, the former thief smiles and says they'll find all the information they need right inside. With that, the young man and his companions step into the brightly lit room. Looking around, Lee Kale's eyes widen as he notices several armed men in the room. Scattered throughout the space, hooded members handle their blades in a tense atmosphere. Greeting the visitor, the guild leader notices his old ally's return and jokes that he barely recognized her after all this time. Respectfully, the guide greets her former master, who tells her to speak with him as comfortably as before. Wasting no time, she demands to know Civet's whereabouts, while the leader notes that information is costly, though he'll make an exception. Laughing at the reunion, the man says he'll share it for free out of old friendship, and because it isn't much of a secret anyway. Listening closely, Lee Kale is surprised to learn that the person they're looking for is locked up in the Royal Detention Center. The leader then reveals she was arrested 4 days ago trying to sneak into a caravan, mocking the excuse she gave when caught. With her hand on her forehead, the guide listens as the old man asks her to remind the girl to pay her 6 months of overdue fees. Turning his gaze toward the group, the receptionist suddenly calls out to the young mage. Surprised by the call, Lee Kale asks if he's really talking to him. Fixing his gaze, the man offers a crucial piece of information for 30 gold coins. Outraged by the steep price, Lee Kale questions the sudden sales pitch, but the old man promises to refund the money if the lead is useless. Unsure about the deal, the young man glances at the guide to confirm if he can trust her master's word. With a nod, the former thief assures him that the information is worth every single coin. Hearing her guarantee, Lee Kale hands over the bag of money, stating he's only going through with it because he trusts her word. Pocketing the payment, the old man reveals that mysterious men are searching for a mage and a half-elf. Stunned by the warning, Lee Kale and Lucy listen as the receptionist explains he investigated the group and uncovered their ties to the dark mage cult. With a mysterious smile, the man adds that there's still one more important detail about this search. Revealing his betrayal, the old man claims that turning them in will net a massive reward, just as several armed criminals surround the group. Cornered, Lee Kale speaks up in a defiant tone as he realizes it was a setup all along. Without hesitation, the young man summons a glowing magic circle in his palm to cast his spell. With flames bursting all around him, Lee Kale openly declares that he doesn't need a staff to use his magic. Challenging everyone, Lee Kale shouts for them to come at him, threatening to blow the whole place to pieces. Facing the threat, the armed men hesitate and back away as they realize how dangerous the situation just became. Terrified by Lee Kale's reaction, the guide begs him to calm down, while her master admits the kid is far more skilled than he anticipated. Watching the fire dancing in the young man's hands, the old man mutters that getting mixed up in dangerous jobs out of greed never ends well. He then apologizes for testing them and asks if the information proved useful. Extinguishing the magic in his hand, Lee Kale replies that the warning was good for something, announcing that they're leaving. As the group walks away, the old man tells them to seek him out again if they ever need more information in the future. Walking out, Lee Kale quietly observes his surroundings, processing everything that just happened. Inside, the guild's facade remains calm under the night sky. Scratching his head, Lee Kale mentions to the warrior that at least they found Civet's whereabouts, despite almost blowing the place sky high. Sighing deeply, the guide reveals the girl is in the Royal Detention Center and promises to take them there, even if she hates the idea. Shortly after, the group makes their way to the imposing Royal Detention Center. Upon entering, a bald officer laughs out loud as he recognizes the visitor. Standing in the hallway, Lee Kale anxiously watches the two talk. Laughing off the inspector's warning, the former thief assures him she retired a long time ago and thanks him for the help. Impressed, Lee Kale asks in surprise if she was friends with the detention center inspector for them to get in so easily. Smiling, the woman explains she used to work as an informant for him and helped catch a dangerous criminal back in the day. Walking down the guarded hallway, the former thief comments that she never imagined returning to this place because of civ. As they walk, Lee Kale cautiously glances at the surrounding cells. Inside one of the units, a scarred, glare-heavy prisoner watches the group pass by. Scowling, the man barks out, asking what the kid is staring at. Pulling Lee Kale away, the woman tells him to ignore the guy and refrain from talking to unauthorized prisoners. Stopping in front of a specific cell, the guard calls out to Civet, letting her know she has visitors. Approaching the bars, the girl asks in a serious tone who these people are supposed to be. Bound by chains, the prisoner firmly states she doesn't know any of them. Standing outside, the guide asks if the girl really doesn't remember her after all this time. Looking closely at the visitor, the girl's eyes widen as she realizes who it is. Astonished by the former thief's changed appearance, the prisoner asks what she's doing here, only to be told that others are the interested ones. The guide then points to Lee Kale, Elysian, Lucy, and the warrior, revealing that they're the ones who want to talk. While the prisoner comments on the group's odd lineup, Lucy fires back, saying a half-cat girl is just as unusual. Getting straight to the point, the prisoner asks what they want from her, to which Lee Kale explains he has something to ask. Hearing this, the cat girl angrily demands that they get her out of this cell first. Shortly after, the detention center's facade stands out under the night sky. Outside, Lee Kale cries over how expensive the bail was, but Lucy reminds him he still has plenty of gold left. The moment she's freed, the young girl massages her sore wrists after getting rid of the chains. Furious, the ex-prisoner yells that it wasn't her fault she got lost and stuck there for 4 days, swearing never to return to that place. Curious, Lee Kale asks what he should call her, and the girl tells them to just use her nickname, Siva. Introducing himself politely, the young man says his name is LK and mentions it's a pleasure to meet her. Ignoring his greeting, the girl suggests skipping the formalities so they can get something to eat right away. With that, the group agrees to return to the inn to rest after such a long day. Feeling brushed off by her cold attitude, Lee Kale complains, completely shocked by her indifference. The next morning, the sun rises, illuminating the building's wooden and stone facade. Devouring her meal greedily, the young girl comments that it's a shame there's no fish, but the meat will do just fine. Watching her at the table, Lee Kale wonders out loud if their group isn't gathering too many similar party members. Getting back to the main point, the girl asks what they wanted to ask her, prompting the young man to prepare his explanation. The moment Lee Kale mentions the fairy forest, Sivet's eyes snap wide in surprise. She slams her hand down hard onto the wooden table. Thanking them for the meal, the young girl suddenly stands up and announces she's leaving. Startled by her sudden attempt to run, Lee Kale yells at her to pay back the 100 gold coins for her bail before walking away. He then proposes counting the bail as payment if she tells them everything she knows about the place. Irritated, the girl demands that he keep his word and not back out of the deal. Curious, the ex-prisoner asks why they're so interested in that forest in the first place. Straight to the point, Lee Kale asks how long ago she was there and how far in she managed to get. Taking a sip from her mug, Sivet reveals she was in the region 10 years ago and made it to the fairy palace 3 whole times. Hearing this, Lee Kale celebrates enthusiastically, realizing she actually reached the very center of the forest. Eager for more details about the journey, the young man presses her, but the girl clearly doesn't want to talk about her past. Glaring intimidatingly while chewing her food, Lucy reminds the girl about her 100 gold coin debt. Pressured by the demand, Sivet gives in with annoyance and asks for another mug of beer before she begins her story. With an awkward smile, the cat girl hesitates for a moment before starting her recap. Crossing her arms, she sighs, admitting she really wished she didn't have to relive those events. Following the story, the girl asks if the major problem they faced was the bandits. She then explains that her father was hired as a mercenary to retrieve the carriages trying to escape the criminals in the fairy forest. Although everyone said no one ever returned from that place, he managed to make it back all by himself. Upon reappearing, he made the nonsense claim that a fairy had helped him along the way. Impressed by the story, Lee Kale asks in surprise if the man had truly been to the forest multiple times. The girl confirms it, adding that he brought back rare herbs to sell to merchants, though she and her mother never saw a dime of that money. One day, the man asked his daughter to come along so he could introduce her to the creatures. Because of that, she ended up entering the mysterious place about 3 times alongside her father. Slamming her hand on the table in anger, the young girl rants against her father for abandoning her mother at the moment of her death. Faced with the sudden outburst of rage, the companions remain silent around the table. Next, the girl demands to know why they wanted to know all this if they weren't even planning to enter the fairy forest. Awkwardly, Lee Kale chuckles self-consciously as he admits that's exactly what they plan to do. Stunned by the confirmation, the former prisoner yells, asking if he's lost his mind and wants to die so recklessly. Trying to calm things down, Lee Kale explains that he needs to find something there, prompting the girl to ask if it's a unicorn horn. Hearing him clarify that he's looking for a magical object, the girl asks in surprise if he's a mage. Continuing her observations, the former prisoner points out that they have a novice mage and a half-elf girl. She then adds that the team also includes an intimidating beast man and a priestess. Looking at that lineup, the cat person expresses her hesitation, while Lee Kale argues that's precisely why they need an experienced guide. When Lucy reminds her that she made it out of the forest alive, the girl counters that she was just lucky and swears she'll never return to that cursed place. Right after, the elf steps into the conversation, pointing out directly that it all comes down to money. Confronting the girl, Lucy suggests she needs resources, which is why she infiltrated the merchant caravan in the first place. As she makes the implication, her companion gives her head an affectionate pat. Excited by the argument, Lee Kale openly praises Lucy's sharp take on the situation. Showing off the bag of coins, the young man asks if the former prisoner might be interested in the reward. Annoyed by the offer, the girl yells that money isn't worth her life, while Lee Kale stresses that he wants to hire her so they can all return safely. Staring at each other intensely in a tense atmosphere, the two negotiate until the cat person demands 1,000 gold coins for the job. Considering the offer, Lee Kale calculates that the amount fits perfectly within the reward he received from the Baron. Noticing his hesitation, the girl panics over the high price and lowers the fee on her own to 500 coins. Seizing the opportunity, Lee Kale promptly agrees to close the deal at the new proposed price. Pulling the coin purse away, he warns her that he'll only hand over the payment once the job is complete. Bluntly, the girl warns that she'll run at the first sign of danger and won't be responsible for the party. Saying goodbye to Lee Kale, she lets him know she's leaving for today and that they'll meet again tomorrow. Irritated, Elysian complains that they didn't even get a thank you for paying her bail, expressing her distrust toward the guide's behavior. Faced with his companion's rant, Lee Kale simply stays silent, taking in the situation. Weighing the possibilities, the warrior muses that they'd have to go alone if the guide didn't show up, recalling that was their original plan anyway. The next day, the sun rises bright and warm over the city walls. Gathered beside the carriage, the group prepares to start their journey in front of the innkeepers. Lost in thought, Lee Kale ponders whether he can boost his magic with the dragon heart fragment, even though he doesn't know any 6th tier spells. Scratching his chin, the young man wonders if he should dive into his studies now, lamenting that he has to put in the same effort he did back in his hometown. He then sighs over not being able to enjoy the city due to the constant threat of the dark mage. Noticing his reaction, the elf asks if something's wrong, but he denies it right away. When asked about the danger of entering the forest, Lucy assures Lee Kale that there's no better place for her to be than the woods. Hearing that, the young man suddenly remembers that she's a half-elf. Noticing the guide is late, the warrior states she isn't coming, but Lee Kale asks them to wait a bit longer. While Elysian claims she never trusted the guide, the young man reasons that at least they didn't pay her anything up front. Seeing the party's determination to leave, the innkeeper advises them to be careful, while the warrior promises to visit the place again when they return. Surprised by a call from behind, Lee Kale and his companion turn around to see who's asking about their departure. Standing before the group, the young cat person suddenly appears, revealing she decided to join them on the journey. Overjoyed by her presence, Lee Kale asks if she really kept her promise. But the girl coldly replies that she only came for the cash. Impressed by her blunt response, the young man simply follows her, thinking about how brutally honest she can be. Settling inside the vehicle, the guide crosses her legs casually as the trip begins. Sitting with her arms crossed inside the carriage, the young girl stares intently at Elysian and the elf in a tense silence. Gazing at the newcomer with suspicion, the priestess maintains a stern glare without saying a single word beside Lucy. Outside, the warrior mentions it will take about half a day to reach the forest, while Lee Kale decides to ride next to him on the front bench. With the horses at a full gallop, the carriage takes off down the dirt road, leaving the locals behind. As time passes, the vehicle presses forward through the region's peaceful greenery. Shortly after, the party approaches a signed intersection right at the entrance of the woods. Looking inside, the guide instructs them to keep going straight, explaining that the path was built by people to bypass the fairy forest. Curious, Lee Kale asks if anyone ever tried to destroy the woods, to which the warrior replies that every attempt to burn or chop down the trees failed. Suddenly, the carriage wheel rattles loudly as it rolls over a bump in the ground. Moving down the dirt road, the vehicle continues its route, surrounded by the dense trees of the forest. As the journey goes on, the carriage keeps rolling smoothly along the path. Looking around, Lee Kale comments that the place looks like just an ordinary forest to him. Hearing him, the cat person replies that it might seem that way for now, but he won't be saying the same thing for long. Growing even more uneasy at her warning, Lee Kale decides to pull out his device to check their location. Checking the glowing screen, he notes with surprise that their objective is actually close by, somewhere inside those woods. Right after, a sudden jolt makes Lee Kale's eyes widen in shock. Confused, the young man asks if he drifted off for a second, while the warrior warns that the air around them has changed. At that moment, intense beams of light begin to cut through the treetops in a mysterious fashion. Looking up, Lucy alerts everyone that the flow of mana in the environment has suddenly shifted. The guide then steps closer to Lee Kale and hands him a small object. Caught off guard by the gesture, the young man stares at the item, unsure of what it is. In the palm of his hand, the compass needle starts spinning wildly in every direction. With a serious expression, the cat person firmly declares that they've finally reached their destination. Before the gathered group, the entrance to the legendary fairy forest is revealed. Standing before the group, the guide firmly announces that they have finally reached their destination. Above them, the canopy shimmers as the legendary fairy forest reveals itself. Dense foliage quickly covers the path, closing in like a roof over the travelers. Holding the small journal in her hands, the girl remarks that she never thought she'd have to use it again. Looking at the book, Lee Kale asks what it is, and she replies that it's her father's travel journal. Open on her lap, the pages reveal plant illustrations and extremely messy notes. Examining the contents, the young man and his companion wonder if anyone can actually read that handwriting. At that, the girl tells him not to be embarrassed if he can't read, but he shoots back that her dad's handwriting is just terrible. Unsure how to proceed, Lee Kale asks what they should do now as the guide searches through her bag. Taking out a pouch filled with glowing dust, the former prisoner says they just need to use what's recommended inside. Right after, the cat girl scoops up a small pinch of the dust with her fingertips. In front of the group, she puts the substance straight into her mouth. Watching this, Lee Kale asks if that's some kind of illegal drug, but the girl shouts back that it's fairy dust. Shocked by the revelation, the boy asks if she ground up little creatures to make. Stepping into the conversation, Eli Shin explains that the dust is simply gathered from fairy wings, while Lee Kale asks how they're supposed to use it. When questioned about eating the substance, the guide tells Lee Kale to shut up, stating she's just trying to find the path in the book. Next, a bit of the glowing dust is carefully poured inside a lantern. With that, the container lights up, casting a brilliant glow through the glass. Lifting the lantern high, the girl explains that they must follow the direction the light points to. Analyzing the phenomenon, Lee Kale and the warrior deduce that the substance is naturally drawn to the spirit realm. Looking back, the cat girl mockingly asks if he's actually smart or just naive. With their routes set, the party decides to resume their march before night fully falls. As twilight settles, Small owls quietly watch from a high branch above the woods. Moving along the dirt road, the carriage continues its journey through the peaceful forest. Noticing the approaching darkness, the warrior suggests to Lee Kale that they take a break and rest nearby. Shortly after, they light a large campfire to warm and illuminate their makeshift campsite. Patting the mounts, the young man worries about the animals' fatigue, but the warrior assures him of their great endurance. Curious about the horse's homeland, Lee Kale listens as his companion speaks longingly of his home region. Hearing the man plan to open a ranch in the future, Lucy gets excited and asks him to reserve some horses for her too. Looking at the focus guide, Lee Kale calmly remarks that nothing unusual has happened so far. Gazing at the trees, the guide ponders that the place feels a bit different from last time, warning that things will get stranger the deeper they go. Watching the path, Lucy notes that the environment is already changing, leaving Lee Kale intrigued. Suddenly, a brilliant sphere of light appears, glowing intensely amidst the foliage. Countless luminous particles then float into the air, making Lee Kale and his companion look up in awe. Captivated by the sight, Elysian reaches out toward the light, recognizing the phenomenon. Observing the orbs, Lucy explains that these lights are seeds that turn into light spirits from the spirit realm. Admiring the view, the warrior comments that he's never seen anything like it in his travels, while Elysian praises the beauty of the moment. Meanwhile, the cat girl simply watches the floating lights in absolute silence. Surprised by its touch, Lucy celebrates as she manages to land one of the glowing orbs right in her hands. Trying to touch the light without success, Elysian laments that she can't reach them, and Lee Kale wonders if it's because they are human. Seeing the elf interact with the orb, Lee Kale asks in amazement if that speck of light can actually talk. Confirming his suspicion, Lucy reveals that the little creature told her there are no more fairies left in the forest. Unable to accept the news, Lee Kale shouts that a fairy forest without fairies makes no sense, but the girl replies that they simply vanish. Suddenly, everyone is startled to see the glowing spheres begin to move together across the ground. Noticing that one light didn't follow the rest, Lucy decides to think of a name for it, while Lee Kale asks in surprise if she plans on keeping it. Scratching his chin, Lee Kale suggests naming it LS since it's a light spirit, and the girl excitedly agrees with the idea. Right after, the young man asks if she learned about spirits from her mother, since she's an elementalist, while Lucy wonders if the creature likes its new name. Running away with a pout, the elf grumbles that her mother always said she had no talent, leaving Lee Kale to wonder what she's even good at besides beating people up. With that, the boy recalls Saphir's lessons about how spirits need energy to manifest and serve as the foundation for mana. He also remembers his master explaining that mages store mana in formulas, whereas elementalists channel raw energy directly. She had added that elementalists have no levels, as it's impossible to learn without a natural affinity like elves and fairies have. Back in the present, Lee Kale asks if Lucy can sense the dragon heart nearby, but she replies that she can't feel it yet. Sighing deeply, the boy considers that they need to go deeper into the forest, and suggests resting due to the late hour. Under the starry night sky, Lee Kale quietly ponders where the fragment could be hidden in a forest devoid of fairies. The next morning, the sun rises brightly in a clear sky to start another day of travel. Complaining about how exhausting camping outdoors is, the boy is approached by the guide asking to confirm their agreed payment. Handing over the pouch of coins, Lee Kale explains he's giving half now and the rest once they leave, receiving a quick thank you from her. Curious about what she'll do with it, the young man asks, and the cat girl reveals she needs to pay off her mother's medical debts. Grit her teeth in anger, the girl blames her father for her situation, venting about having to return to this place. Walking back toward the carriage, the guide tells Lee Kale it will take about 4 days to reach the Mirror Lake if they don't get lost along the way. Seeing her reaction, Lee Kale quietly wonders if he touched on a sensitive subject. Shortly after, the carriage wheels continue to rumble noisily along the dirt road. Observing the surrounding landscape, the warrior notices with surprise that the color of the trees has suddenly changed. At that, Lee Kale remarks that he now understands how people got lost in this forest, and the man agrees instantly. Looking through the vehicle's window, Elysian wonders if this means they are venturing even deeper into the woods. Suddenly, a blinding flash completely envelopes the carriage in the middle of the road. Caught off guard by the intense light, Lee Kale crosses his arms to shield his face. Squeezing his eyes shut, the young man waits in the dark until the glare finally begins to fade. Slowly opening one eye, the boy tries to figure out what just happened around them. Standing before a vast expanse of crystal clear water, Lee Kale asks in amazement if they've already reached the Mirror Lake. Looking at the shore, the guide clarifies that it's just an ordinary lake, and that it will still take time to reach their destination. Seeing the clean water, the warrior suggests they all take a break and set up camp there. Gazing at the serene setting, Elysian smiles in relief at the peaceful view. Suddenly, the priestess lets out a startled scream as something catches her off guard right ahead. Hearing the sudden cry, Lee Kale, Lucy, and the man instantly snap into full alert. Looking at the priestess, Lee Kale asks what's wrong while Elysian stammers, pointing at something emerging before them. Staring in the same direction, the guide's eyes widen in shock as she realizes what it is. Right in front of them, a majestic unicorn with a spiral horn reveals itself from the foliage. Stunned by the sight, Lee Kale shouts in sheer disbelief as he confirms the unicorn's appearance. Right before the group, the unicorn lowers its head to peacefully graze on the greenery. Amazed by the sight, Lucy marvels that she's never seen such a creature before. Dismissively, the girl shoots back that it's just an ordinary unicorn with nothing special about it. The warrior then explains that legend says these creatures are wary of strangers but calm down around pure-hearted girls. Curious, Lee Kale asks if the same applies to pure-hearted guys, making his companion burst out laughing and dare him to try. Hesitantly reaching out his hand, the young man confesses his fear of getting kicked by the animal. Without a shred of fear, Lucy strokes the unicorn's muzzle, reassuring him that it's quite gentle. Excited by the creature's reaction, the cat girl announces she wants to try getting closer too. Delicately, the young girl places her hand on the animal's muzzle. Praising the creature's gentleness, she continues petting it alongside Lucy. Watching the scene in annoyance, Lee Kale complains that the creature only accepts affection because they're girls. Hyped up by the situation, Elysian announces that she wants to try petting it as well. To everyone's surprise, the creature rears up in fear and desperately backs away from her gesture. Stalked by the reaction, Elysian asks what she did wrong, while her companion tries to hold back a laugh beside her. In a teasing tone, the girl hints at her companion's lack of purity, leaving the priestess completely humiliated. Elysian desperately tries to explain herself to Lee Kale, claiming she's innocent while the young man questions her, clueless about what she's talking about. The priestess then huffs that she did nothing wrong, insisting that unicorn is just plain weird. Hearing that, Lee Kale reasons that it can't be the animal's fault since it can't even talk, but the girl angrily demands that he just take her word for it. While the guide remarks that all priestesses just fake innocence, Elysian cries in frustration, insulting the creature. Devastated on the ground, the girl wonders why even a thief can touch the animal while it runs away from her touch. Unable to accept the rejection, Elysian screams through tears, trying to understand why she's being shunned. Approaching with the mount, Lucy explains that the creature was only skittish because a human approached, assuring her that she can touch it now. Beaming at the news, Elysian wraps her arms around the unicorn's neck, complaining that it should have let her touch it from the start. Watching the scene, the warrior mentions rumors that the animal's horn has the power to cure any ailment, leaving Lee Kale surprised. Upon hearing about the priceless value the item fetches on the market, the guide instantly grows thoughtful. Noticing her suspicious reaction, Lee Kale confronts her directly, asking if she's planning something dangerous. Faced with the question, the cat girl flusteredly denies it, while Elysian and the young man warn her about the dangers and cruelty of illegal hunting. While her companions argue over the guide's intentions, the elf quickly climbs onto the unicorn's back. Settled on the mount, Lucy informs the group that the creature offered to lead them through a shortcut. Excited about the easier route, the warrior suggests everyone get back in the carriage to resume their journey. Moving along the path surrounded by beautiful trees, the carriage continues its course beneath the forest canopy. Gazing out the vehicle's window, Lee Kale silently regrets not being able to take a photo of the landscape. He then reflects that he will never forget this magnificent place, even after managing to return to his own world. With a determined look, Lee Kale reminds himself that to do so, he needs to find the dragon heart fragment as quickly as possible. Suddenly, Lucy looks to the side and alerts the group that they've finally reached their destination. Spread out before everyone, the shore of the massive mirror lake emerges on the horizon. Awestruck by its sheer scale, Lee Kale exclaims in surprise, asking if this isn't more of an ocean than a lake. Looking down, the young man notices how clear the water is, to the point where he can vividly see his own reflection. Feeling thirsty, Lee Kale decides to kneel by the shore to scoop up some water. Without hesitation, he reaches his hand toward the lake's surface to touch the water. Suddenly, a whip snaps through the air as a voice screams at him to stop immediately. Caught off guard, Lee Kale gasps in shock as the whip coils tightly around his wrist. With a violent jerk, the guide yanks the whip to pull him away from the shore. Thrown backward, the young man lands hard on the dirt, letting out a groan of pain from the impact. Sitting up angrily, Lee Kale yells, demanding to know why she attacked him, while the girl snaps back furiously, asking if he has a death wish. Shouting in alarm, the guide warns that anything touching the water of that lake will be sucked right into it. Sprawled on the ground, Lee Kale mutters, completely lost by what she just said. To demonstrate the danger, the girl lowers the tip of a tree branch toward the lake's surface. Instantly, the tip of the wooden stick magically vanishes the moment it touches the water. Stunned by the sight, Lee Kale angrily demands to know why she didn't warn him about that sooner. Hanging her head, the girl excuses herself by saying she only remembered that detail just now, leaving him speechless. Pointing at the water, the cat girl points out that her own reflection is still holding the branch, commenting on how bizarre the place is. Determined to test the local magic, Lee Kale conjures a fireball in the palm of his hand. Without hesitation, he hurls the spell straight at the water's surface. As soon as the flame nears the lake, the element reacts with the reflection formed below. In a fraction of a second, the magical sphere evaporates, vanishing without a trace. Stunned by the result, Lee Kale realizes his mana simply vanished, while Elysian suggests the lake might be connected to another dimension. Taking in the landscape, the young man recalls stories about the world of reflections, a place from which nothing ever escapes. Looking down, Lee Kale concludes they won't even be able to use a boat to cross. Turning to the girl, he asks where the fairy palace is located, and the guide replies that it's hidden beyond the mist. Learning that the palace is their destination, Lee Kale asks how she crossed the lake last time, but the girl admits she only managed to make it up to this point. As the two talk, Lucy notices the small light spirit drifting away and asks where the creature is heading. Watching the glowing orb rise into the sky, Lee Kale wonders if it's returning to the spirit realm, then asks where the unicorn went. The guide then suggests flying over the water using magic, but the young man points out they'd run out of mana midway and plunge straight into the lake. Faced with the obstacle, he silently wonders if he'll have to abandon the quest despite being so close to his goal. Cutting off his thoughts, Lucy points ahead and calls Lee Kale over to check something out in the fog. Looking in the direction she indicated, the group spots a glowing light emerging through the dense mist over the water. Approaching through the air, the intense glow reveals itself to be the returned light spirit. Seeing the creature, the elf notices something massive following right behind it, while Lee Kale tries to peer through the fog. Wasting no time, the young man activates his vision spell to clear up the view. Before his attentive gaze, a massive wing covered in pure white feathers extends through the mist. With absolute shock at the sight, Lee Kale gasps in astonishment as he realizes what it is. Descending from the sky over the lake, magnificent winged horses reveal themselves to the travelers. Standing on the beach, the group watches in awe as a herd of winged horses lands on the sand. Impressed by the sight, the warrior states he has never seen anything so incredible in his entire life. While praising the little spirit, Lucy hears Lee Kale ask if the creature brought the mounts to help them. Lucy reveals to the young man that the winged horses offered to take them on a journey. Without wasting any time, the creature takes to the sky in a high-speed flight. Holding on tight to his mount, Lee Kale tells himself he can't die here. Cutting through the sky at top speed, the winged horse carries the young man through the air currents. Dizzy from the strong wind, the boy squeezes his eyes shut, waiting for the turbulent flight to end. Gradually the wind dies down and a quiet stillness takes over the surroundings. Slowly opening one eye, Lee Kale wonders if they are finally safe. Looking back, Lucy warns that another obstacle is approaching, leaving Lee Kale confused. Suddenly, amid screams of desperation, the winged horses dive together into the heart of a whirlwind. Moments later, the storm clears, revealing the serene shore of a new landscape. Sprawled on the sand, the young man lies completely stunned, trying to process what just happened. Relieved alongside Elysian and his companions, Lee Kale joyfully celebrates making it through the crossing alive. With a relieved smile, Elysian remarks that the important thing is that everyone is safe, while Lee Kale admits he thought he was going to die right there. Irritated, the catgirl snaps that they almost died, but the priestess counters that it's all fine since they survive. Checking his glowing device, the young man realizes with surprise that they have finally reached the right location. Suddenly, Lucy catches Lee Kale's attention and points ahead to show him something. Before the group, the majestic fairy palace rises in the distance. As the elf announces, she can feel the dragon heart nearby. Excited by her confirmation, Lee Kale firmly declares that they must head there immediately. As they draw closer, the travelers come across a vast garden filled with rare flowers and valuable herbs. Curious about the plants, the young man asks what they are, and the warrior replies that they're herbs for magical experiments, asking why he didn't know that. Loudly, Lee Kale states that his master focused on practical training rather than experiments, prompting the guide to ask if he's really an idiot. Seeing the cat girl crouching down to pick the flowers, the young man shouts to ask what she's doing, reminding her that this place belongs to the fairy palace. Backing up the warning, Elysian warns that the fairies won't forgive them if the garden is destroyed, and Sveta angrily agrees to give up harvesting. Afterward, the group approaches the grand stone entrance covered in lush vegetation. Looking at the sunlit structure, Lee Kale remarks that the building is still well preserved despite the test of time. Intrigued by the quiet atmosphere, the young man asks if anyone is really there, and Lucy encourages him to go in. Standing before the massive vine-covered door, they listen as the elf confirms that the magic stone is hidden inside. Slowly, the vines part as the wooden door begins to shift. Suddenly, the heavy structure swings open on its own, revealing the palace interior. Parted by what just happened, the guide lets out a gasp as the door opens by itself, while a mysterious voice welcomes the group. Appearing before the travelers, the winged figure introduces herself as the Lady of the Forest and Queen of the Fairies. With a gentle smile, the woman adds that she is the last of her kind, and that her name is Lillian. Curious about her appearance, Lee Kale asks how the queen can be so large, and Lillian explains she uses the palace's magic to match the visitor's size so they can speak properly. Ever thoughtful, Lillian notes that it would be rude to leave her guests standing and offers to lead them to the main hall. Lee Kale and his companions then follow the ruler down the palace's brightly lit corridor. Upon entering the room, everyone marvels at the lavish architecture covered in glowing foliage. Shortly after, the host serves fragrant tea and delicate cups to make her guests comfortable. Settled in her seat, Lillian apologizes for the simple reception, but Lee Kale replies that they arrived unannounced and asks how she already knew about their visit. Smiling warmly, the queen reveals that the little spirit of light had already informed her of their arrival. As Lillian explains that the wind spirits warned her as well, Lee Kale ponders what he should call her, only for the woman to ask him to simply use her name. Getting straight to the point, Lee Kale asks Lillian if she can guess the real reason they came all this way. Admitting she isn't omnipotent, Lillian asks for the reason behind their visit, while Lee Kale prepares to answer. Glancing to the side, the young man hesitates for a moment on how to begin. Looking at Elysian and the companions gathered there, Lee Kale silently reflects that they have the right to know the truth. Taking a deep breath before the group, the young man opens his mouth to finally make his revelation. With a determined look, Lee Kale openly declares that he is searching for the fragment of the dragon heart. Listening to the confession with utter serenity, Lillian asks if the young man has any idea where the object is. At that exact moment, the glowing necklace around the queen's neck shines brightly as she finishes her question. Surprised by the revelation, Elysian and the warrior react in shock upon hearing that the group is looking for the dragon heart. Hearing this, Elysian asks if he means the artifact with concentrated mana, and Lee Kale confirms that he does. Annoyed, the guide questions why they don't look directly in a dragon's nest, prompting the young man to shoot back, asking if she thinks they would just hand the item over for free. Turning to the young man, the fairy queen concludes they came for the fragment, and Lee Kale asks if she happens to know where it is. Facing the question, the sovereign simply remains silent for a few moments. Then, she closes her eyes thoughtfully before making a decision. Apologizing, the sovereign asks 3 of his companions to leave the room so they can talk in private. As Lee Kale and Lucy watch in surprise, the sovereign explains that she needs to discuss a specific matter with just the 2 of them. Understanding the situation, the warrior leads the girl and the guide out of the room, despite the former prisoner's protests. As soon as the door closes, silence fills the main hall. Lowering her head, the fairy queen unexpectedly declares that she rejects their request and asks what they plan to do about it. Utterly shocked by the refusal, Lee Kale stammers in panic, not knowing how to react to her answer. Letting out a soft laugh, the sovereign reveals she was only joking, leaving the young man completely flustered. Looking closely at the elf, the queen remarks that she seemed familiar, and realizes she is Ryard's daughter, which Lucy confirms immediately. Upon hearing that revelation, Lee Kale asks in shock if the fairy queen also knows the legendary warrior. Regarding that, the sovereign explains that Ryard visited the place in the past and did everything he could, along with other dragons, to cure the fairy's disease. Next, Lillian asks why they are seeking the dragon heart since it is a keepsake of Acarion, and requests details about his wish. Hearing this, Lee Kale hesitates sheepishly, thinking it would be embarrassing to admit he wanted the item just for personal use. Even so, the young man decides to tell the whole truth to ask for help, and begins to explain his situation. Without hesitation, Lee Kale openly reveals that he is not from this world, but rather a human from another dimension. As the revelation is made, the majestic palace remains surrounded by the silence of the forest. Continuing his explanation, the young man shares the details of how he ended up there and his need to find a way back. Listening in silence, the queen simply watches the young man as she takes in every detail of his story. Outside the room, the other companions wait patiently while the guide yawns with fatigue. Concluding his story, Lee Kale states that he needs to gather the fragments of the dragon heart to return to his homeland. Curious, Lillian asks if Ryard is also researching the dimensional gate on his own, and the young man replies that he believes so. To himself, Lee Kale thinks there's a good chance the legendary warrior is just having fun with Lucy's mother. Right after, the sovereign reaches for her neck to take off the necklace she was wearing. Holding out her hands, the queen gives the object to the young man, and reveals that the necklace itself is a fragment of the dragon heart. Caught off guard by the gesture, Lee Kale asks if she is sure about this, to which the sovereign replies that she trusts Ryard's motives. Gently, the queen adds with a smile that she honestly has no use for the object anyway. Surprised by the door suddenly opening, Lee Kale turns to the guide and asks what she means by that. Embarrassed, the cat girl explains she couldn't hear anything from the outside, while the young man asks if she eavesdropped on the whole conversation. Curious after noticing the artifact he obtained, the guide teases him by asking what they talked about alone, but Lee Kale retorts that he would never share a private matter. Shifting the focus of the conversation, the young man asks the sovereign about her claim that she is the last of her kind, and has no use for the item. Because of that, Lee Kale asks if she's saying there are no other fairies left in the world besides her. With a serene look, the sovereign gently explains that it is a rather long story to tell. Explaining her tale, the queen recalls that the world is inhabited by various races, such as humans, beastkin, and elves. Then, she goes on to mention the historical presence of fairies and imposing dragons as well. Continuing the explanation, the sovereign recounts how instability between dimensions opened passages that allowed fairies to manifest in the material world. The queen adds that many fairies managed to migrate to the forest, but admits that adapting to the material world was extremely difficult. Following her explanation, she shares that the influence of the new environment caused mutations, leading to fairies being born with human-sized bodies. The queen reveals that these creatures lost their wings and developed physical strength far beyond their mental capacity. Next, the sovereign describes how these mutants left the forest to mingle with other races and rapidly change. Concluding the story, the queen reveals that this split gave rise to a subrace known today as elves. Impressed by the revelation, Elysian comments that she knew about the kinship between elves and fairies, while the guide wonders how things reached that point. Continuing her explanation, the queen shares that unlike the elves who adapted quickly, the fairies tried in vain to shape the environment around them. Next, she describes how other races joined forces to build the fairy palace as a gift and a symbol of cooperation. Lillian emphasizes that the place became a symbol of peace among the peoples, regretting that the fairies gave up on themselves while others fought on. Recalling the past, the sovereign laments that her species remained stagnant in parties and songs while the rest of the world evolved. Continuing her account, Lillian explains that the situation worsened drastically when the dark mage Ragdoom started the War of the Sacred Castle. With sadness, she details how humans, elves, beastkin, and even the powerful dragons joined forces to fight the demonic threat. Next, the queen reveals that the fairies hid from the conflict and reinforced the forest protection out of fear of invasion. However, she explains that the demonic energy remaining on the continent ended up spreading through the woods, giving rise to a severe disease. Facing the tragedy, Lillian sorrowfully shares that half of the fairies lost their lives, and the species stopped reproducing out of sheer dread of contagion. Heartbroken, the sovereign acknowledges that the tragedy was the consequence of turning their backs on the rest of the world. Next, Lillian relates that she opened a dimensional portal so the healthy fairies could abandon their bodies and return to the spiritual world as spirits. Sad, the queen concludes that her race failed to find a purpose to evolve and simply ended up running away from reality once again. As the warrior listens to the story in silence with his head bowed, she explains that this is why there are no more fairies in the forest. Wrapping up the story, Lillian warmly thanks Lee Kuehl and his companions for listening to her account to the very end. Faced with the sovereign's gratitude, the cat girl simply remains silent with a hesitant expression. Hesitating for a moment, the girl musters up the courage to get the fairy queen's attention. Seeing the queen turn in surprise, the guide explains that she would also like to ask a question. Embarrassed, the cat girl asks if she knows the whereabouts of a man who came there and disappeared, revealing that he is her father. Recognizing the visitor, Lillian comments that she is the child from years ago, and the young girl asks in surprise if the queen really remembers that occasion. Compressed, Lee Kuehl asks if she was already the queen back then, to which the sovereign explains that fairies do not age and merely enter a deep slumber when passing down the throne. At that, Lillian asks if the girl came to the forest looking for her father, but the cat girl tries to brush it off, saying she only came for the money. Smiling affectionately, the queen advises the young girl not to lie, because deep down she misses her father. Completely shaken by the sovereign's words, the girl stammers and shouts that it isn't true. Resuming her explanation, Lillian warns that the forest is strictly protected by spirits, and that intruders pay a heavy price for entering without permission. Curious about the story, Lee Kuehl points out that the guide's father escaped with the fairies' help, but the sovereign admits that this fact was a serious problem. Next, Lillian reveals that the initial barrier existed to protect the fairies, but it had to be reinforced to protect other races from the fairies themselves. Caught off guard by the statement, Lee Kuehl asks what the sovereign means by that. Faced with this provocation, the young man's eyes widen as he begins to understand the gravity of the situation. With a sad look, the queen explains that, except for her who was protected by her royal power, most of the fairies ended up infected by the disease caused by the demonic energy. Continuing the explanation, the sovereign shares that the pollen falling from the fairies' wings was the main source of contagion for the disease. At that, everyone's attention turns to the pouch of glowing powder kept by the girl. Panicking, the guide realizes in shock that she actually ingested that exact same substance. As Lee Kuehl and his companions back away in fear, the sovereign reassures everyone, explaining that the decade-old powder does not spread the illness. Watching the group's reaction, the young girl complains indignantly, realizing they would have isolated her if she were sick. Getting back to the topic, the girl demands to know the real reason her father entered the forest. In response, Lillian gently reveals that the man sought out the place because he was already infected. Despite the girl's protest that her father looked healthy, the queen clarifies that he was an asymptomatic carrier. With a heavy look, the queen adds that the person he infected was someone very close to him. In terrifying shock, the guide discovers through the sovereign that the infected person was her own mother. Amid her memories, the ruler recounts that the man collapsed in panic upon meeting the fairy in the woods. Seeing the intruder, the winged creature asks in surprise how he managed to enter that protected place. Recalling the past, The ruler explains that a long time has passed since the young girl's father met the fairy. Shocked by the revelation, Savita exclaims that this was news to her, and that her father always claimed it was just pneumonia. Faced with her outburst, Elysian considers that illnesses caused by demonic energy are difficult to cure, even with divine magic. Following that logic, the guide realizes her father left for the forest, trying to find a cure before the family was forced into quarantine. In desperation, the man begged for the creature's help upon realizing that ordinary medicinal herbs no longer work. Because of this, he came to believe that the magic within a unicorn's horn could save his wife from the disease. However, the ruler clarifies that hunting the creature was impossible, as the horn's magic would vanish upon its death, and it would only fall asleep near a pure girl. Connecting the dots, Savita finally understands the true reason her father brought her to that place. In silence, the young girl realizes that her father's entire journey was solely meant to save her mother's life. She then asks why the fairy who was supposed to meet them never showed up to deliver help. Lowering her gaze in sadness, Lillian reveals that the creature also ended up dying from the disease, and another obstacle prevented their meeting. Continuing her story, the ruler explains that the caravan's merchants discovered the man was bringing back rare herbs from the forest. Finally, the queen recounts that the merchant leader demanded to be guided through the woods to plunder all the riches there. Thus, the ruler explains that the man refused at first, but ultimately gave in under pressure from the caravan's threats. Lillian recounts that he left leaving only his journal and fairy dust behind, promising it would be his last trip to the forest. Once in the woods, the guide warns the merchants that they need to leave soon before getting lost in that dangerous place. Workingly, the leader retorts that they have come too far to leave empty-handed without finding anything valuable. The chief then shouts orders to his men to grab everything that looks valuable before it's too late. Without hesitation, one of the merchants violently rips a rare plant from the ground. Witnessing such greed, the guide merely watches the destruction of the flora in silence. Suddenly, he turns around in surprise as he hears the fairy's voice calling his name. Appearing in mid-air, the little creature tearfully apologizes, lamenting all the suffering caused to his family. Holding out a glowing sprout, the fairy reveals that this special flower will serve to cure his wife. Taken by surprise, the man is startled to notice the creature's weakened state as he receives the gift. Meanwhile, one of the merchants sneaks a glance through the bushes and notices the magical presence nearby. Awed by the sight, the man shouts loudly, drawing the attention of all his companions. Hearing the merchant announce the fairy's presence, the guide turns around in terror, unsure of how to react. Overcome by greed, the leader furiously orders them to capture the creature immediately to sell it for a fortune. Desperate, the man yells for the little fairy to run away immediately while trying to hold back her pursuers. Watching the creature fly away, the merchants scream furiously, demanding she be captured at all costs. Stepping in front of everyone, the guide demands that the men stop before they harm the magical being. Driven by greed, the intruders accuse the man of ruining their hunt to keep all the riches for himself. Grabbing the man by the collar, the chief rants about his alleged betrayal while the guide begs to be released. Suddenly, the man gasps in shock as he sees two of the criminals dash deeper into the forest. Trying to stop them with a shout, the guide is cowardly struck from behind by one of the merchants. From the brutal impact of the blow, the man collapses violently to the ground. Looking back in panic, the little fairy calls out to her companion as she witnesses the terrible attack. Overwhelmed by grief, the creature cries in agony, realizing there is nothing she can do to help him. Standing over the fallen man, the leader rages furiously at his subordinates for losing the guide and orders them to search his belongings. Down and powerless, the guide whispers to himself that he must hold on and return home. In his final moments of consciousness, he fondly remembers his wife and daughter waiting for his return. Gazing at the sky through the trees, the man silently grieves his inability to keep his promise to return. Searching him, one of the merchants finds the small pouch of powder, utterly confused by its contents. Taking the glowing bag from the guide's belongings, the merchant is stunned to realize it is fairy dust. Moments later, the man's body lies motionless on the ground, while magical energy dissipates around him. Because of this, the energy contained within the substance ends up infecting every merchant present in the woods. And so, The tragic tale of the caravan's fate and the young girl's father comes to an end. In shock from the story, Savetta asks if that special flower would have been enough to save her mother's life. Closing her eyes, Lillian explains that this flower is the most powerful herb in the forest and would have completely cured anyone. Faced with this confirmation, the cat girl lowers her head, trembling as she absorbs the weight of the truth. Clenching her fist tight, the girl rants, refusing to accept everything she has just discovered. Screaming, the young girl demands to know how she could believe her father abandoned her just to try and protect their family. Worried about her reaction, Lee Kuel tries to step in, telling her to calm down. Before him, the cat girl breaks down in deep sob, no longer able to hold back her tears. Amid her tears, the young girl confesses that she hated her father her entire life and doesn't know how to cope with this revelation. Stepping up beside Lee Kuel, Lucy asks in surprise if the girl is crying. Embarrassed, the cat girl hastily wipes her face and loudly denies crying in front of the elf. Overcome with rage, the girl directs her fury at the caravan merchants, declaring she was deceived by them. Reflecting on the story, Lee Kuel remarks that the man was merely used by the traders, while Lucy angrily states that one shouldn't feel pity for humans. Seeing his companion's harsh reaction, the young man playfully asks if she isn't being a bit too blunt. Driven by resentment, the cat girl fumes that she was manipulated by the merchants and forced to obey them due to accumulated debts. Her eyes burning with fury, the girl firmly vows to make those men pay dearly for everything they did. In silence, the fairy queen watches the young girl's reaction with a serene and understanding gaze. Gently, the ruler thanks the girl for sharing all that truth with her. Relieved after opening up, the cat girl reflects that the misunderstanding about her own father has finally been cleared up. With a faint smile, the ruler warmly replies that she is truly happy to hear that. She then warns that they will face many hardships on their journey, but assures them they will overcome everything together. Looking at Lee Kuel and his gathered companions, the queen adds that the diversity of their unity is what will lead them to success. Curious, the young man asks if the ruler won't return to the spiritual realm, to which she replies that a leader never abandons her palace. Gently holding Lee Kuel's hands, the ruler affectionately asks them to come back and visit if the opportunity arises. Looking into his eyes, the ruler fondly declares that they will forever be considered friends of the fairies. With their farewell sealed, the majestic fairy palace stands imposing beneath the illuminated sky. Alongside the group, Lee Kuel glances back for a moment, silently taking in the sight. Approaching out of nowhere, the guide asks if Lee Kuel got anything besides the dragon heart, while the young man assures her he took nothing, questioning if she is even the same person as before. She then demands to see the artifact he obtained, but Lee Kuel instantly refuses, asking how he could possibly trust her. Mockingly sticking out her tongue, the cat girl claims she gives up on the idea and comments on how stingy he is. Just up ahead, the herd of winged horses remains peacefully gathered in the clearing. Tired of the place, the guide suggests they leave the forest right away, to which Lucy replies she doesn't mind staying, only to be told by the girl that it's because she's a half-elf. Taking a few steps away, the young man quietly analyzes the object he received, realizing the situation is bad. Holding the amulet in the palm of his hand, Lee Kuel gazes at the glowing gem, unsure of how to react. Panicking at the artifact's reaction, the young man asks himself in shock if he will really have to absorb all that energy.